Chapter 11:20. Today's first update. With the current speed, the second update will be in 2 hours. Along with the howling northern wind, the thick smoke that continued to gush out from the volcanoes also accelerated with the help of the surging wind, just that it was flowing in the opposite direction from the original direction. The wind and clouds surged, and the endless smoke was gradually pushed away. June Moxie could finally see the current situation of the dozens of volcanoes more clearly. Although the poisonous smoke had already been eliminated, the dozens of volcanoes were still continuously spewing out magma, shooting up hundreds of feet into the sky before falling down. No matter where it fell, it would turn into a charred mess. It was very obvious that the amount of energy that these dozens of volcanoes needed to release was too huge. Thousands of miles of red land. This word was truly well-deserved to be used here. Under such a violent rise in temperature, all the water sources within thousands of miles were decreasing at a speed that could be seen with the naked eye. Many places had already started to show signs of cracking, and this situation was still worsening. Everyone could only watch this terrible situation that was caused by the power of the heavens and earth. It was as if they had experienced a great change in the blink of an eye. Such an incomparably strange and horrifying scene was actually happening. The visual impact that it brought to the onlookers was completely imaginable. It was incomparable, soul-stirring, and ghastly. It was likely that the 3 Holy Lands would not be able to avoid this calamity. June Moxie thought silently. The scope of the eruption of the volcanoes seemed to encompass all the areas around Mount Heaven Saint, and the 3 Holy Lands happened to be located in the most central area of the volcanoes. Such a calamity might have already flattened the entire Mount Heaven Saint. Even if there were survivors, how many could survive? June Moxie sighed in his heart. Suddenly, he thought of something. It seemed like his side had sent out troops too early. He had not expected that the eruption of the volcanoes this time would be so hot, and the destructive power would be so terrifying. The people of the 3 Holy Lands of Mount Heaven Saint would definitely suffer, but would the strange races be comfortable? It didn't make sense that the natural eruption of the volcanoes would only hit the people of Xian's side. He believed that the disaster on the other side must be severe as well. Moreover, the volcanic eruption covered such a large area. Although the people on this side couldn't cross, the people on the other side might not be able to cross. June Moxie secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Perhaps the large number of casualties this time could be reduced by a lot. If he and Mei Shuyan arrived with the hero, Eaglebear, Alliance first, they should be able to avoid many unnecessary casualties. In fact, just based on the current situation, their side might not necessarily be at a disadvantage. Although they would fall into the disadvantage of fighting alone, they would also be able to avoid being hindered by the 3 Holy Land. Many a time, an untrustworthy ally was far more dangerous than a powerful enemy. Based on the current situation, if they really lost the battle strength of the 3 Holy Lands, although their strength would be greatly reduced, they would also have less to worry about. June Moxie, who was rejoicing in his heart, suddenly saw the smoke in front of him tremble. A black dot flew out of the smoke with a whoosh. It flew against the raging north wind, and made an unusually shrill sound as it tore through the air. June Moxie's pupils constricted as he'd already swiftly recognized that the black dot was a person. A person. In this world, in terms of cultivation, the personal disciple of the 9 Nether First Young Master, Miao Qingqing, was naturally the highest. But Miao Qingqing had gone into hiding due to the threat of the heavenly tribulation. Apart from Miao Qingqing, who else could have such abilities? The so-called number 1 in the world, the 9 Serenities and 14 Masters, could be considered as one. But this person was obviously not the 9 Serenities and 14 Masters. And this person's strength might not necessarily be weaker than the 9 Serenities and 14 Masters. Or even stronger. Since these 2 people had already been eliminated, there was only one candidate left in June Moxie's heart. The only candidate, Zhan Luanhui. Then, behind that figure, a total of dozens of figures flew out one after another. Behind that figure, they chased after him with all their might. Even though they were extremely far away from each other, and couldn't see the faces of those people clearly, they could clearly feel the tragic atmosphere in the air. The feeling the people at the back gave off was that as long as they could catch up to the person in front, even if they had to bite him, spit on him, and then die, they would have no regrets. This was an irreconcilable enmity. The figures flew closer and closer, and in the blink of an eye, they could already vaguely see the face of the person in front. Jun Moxie narrowed his eyes and focused his gaze. Jean Luen Hui, it's really him. And the group of people chasing after him was also very familiar to Jun Moxie. It was none other than those seniors from Heaven Saint Palace. The person in the lead was the boss of Heaven Saint Palace, that old monster who had lived for over 3,000 years, Gu Han. And this Gu Han was only a name for these 3,000 years. That identity 3,000 years ago was called Wu Shan Yun. Right now Gu Han's face was frosty, and he looked extremely furious. His clothes were torn all over, and he looked extremely wretched. He no longer had the sage-like demeanor he had when he first saw Jun Dashao. But his eyes were like lightning, and he did not slow down at all. Right now, he was clearly using some sort of self-mutilation method to burn his potential in order to raise his speed to the maximum, so that he could catch up to the fleeing Jean Luen Hui in the shortest time possible. Other than that, it seemed like Gu Han did not even consider his own life. A thought flashed through Jun Moxie's mind. This Jean Luen Hui most likely has something to do with the collapse of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. Otherwise, with a person like Gu Han, he would not be angered to such an extent. Jean Luen Hui continued flying ahead, not even turning his head back. Suddenly Gu Han hollered, "Jean Kuang, do you think this seat doesn't recognize you by running away like this? As a senior of the Xian continent, you are so deranged, destroying the Pillar of Heaven's mountains and shaking the foundations of the Xian continent. You deserve to die." This explosive shout was truly like a thunderclap in spring, and it shook the space in an area of a few thousand kilometers to the point of droning. The echoes continued without end, and it seemed as if even the air had trembled and surged because of this enormous bang. Between the heavens and the earth, numerous veined patterns that were like ripples of water appeared, and then they vanished. Jean Luen Hui continued flying at full speed, increasing his speed instead of slowing down. "Jean Kuang, you can't run. Even if you can run, where can the Jean family run to? You have committed such a heinous crime. You are making the entire Xian continent your enemy." Gu Han hollered angrily. "Stop now. Return to the ancestral tablets and atone for your sins with your death. Perhaps the entire Jean family will not be implicated because of you alone." But Jean Luen Hui flew even faster. Jun Moxie rolled his eyes. This Gu Han really knew how to talk. Telling me to stop obediently, to follow you back, and then atone for my sins with my death? It would be strange if he didn't run even faster after saying such words. People say that the older a person is, the more wisdom and experience they have accumulated. But why would this old demon who had lived for at least 3,000 years say such childish words? In the blink of an eye, Jean Luen Hui had already charged to within 5,000 zhang of Jun Moxie. And Gu Han and the rest were also about this distance from Jean Luen Hui. 5,000 zhang. Jun Mosie's heart skipped a beat, and a sharp light flashed in his eyes. Making a quick decision, he flipped his body, and with a dragon's roar, the blood of yellow flame appeared in his hand. Jean Luen Hui was filled with regret as he sprinted. This time, he had sacrificed over 100 top experts of the Jean family in order to recover more than half of his strength. This time, he had come for a great secret in the Heaven Saint Palace. That secret was the source of the mysterious substance that maintained the functioning of the Misty Mansion. His goal was simple. He wanted to get more of this thing back. Then, the Jean family would use this thing as a bargaining chip to completely suppress the Miao family in the Misty Mansion, and then stabilize their position as the leader of the Misty Mansion. His goal could be said to be very simple, or even very simple. In fact, he had already decided that after successfully obtaining this thing from the Heaven Saint Palace, he would make a trip to the Tian Fa forest and eliminate that lawless brat. He only wanted that thing, and had no intention of becoming enemies with the three Holy Lands. And that brat was someone that the three Holy Lands wanted to eliminate no matter what. By eliminating this brat, he might be able to resolve the grudge between him and the three Holy Lands this time. As for that evil monarch? What young saint, venerable expert? In front of me, Jean Luen Hui, they are all nothing. But he had never imagined that he had taken too much of that mysterious substance this time, causing the seal that the 9 nether first young master had set to lose its balance, and the pillar of heaven's mountains had collapsed because of it. Jean Luen Hui knew that he had gotten himself into big trouble, and quickly fled. As long as he wasn't caught on the spot, he believed that there would still be room for negotiation. But how would he know that with such a huge incident happening, Gu Han and the rest were even thinking of committing suicide? How would they let him go? After a series of intense battles, Jean Luen Hui finally escaped. But the people of the Heaven Saint Palace continued to pursue him relentlessly, even resorting to self-mutilation to not let the matter rest. But Jean Luen Hui was ultimately a veteran expert. His strength was truly extraordinary. Gu Han and the rest could not compare to his understanding, control, and utilization of Heaven-Earth Yuan Qi. Even if Gu Han used self-mutilation to increase his speed, he was still unable to close the distance between them. Seeing that the distance between them was getting further and further, as long as he could escape safely, then everything would be fine. Just because you say I'm Zhan Kuang, then I'm Zhan Kuang? I'll refuse to admit it even to my death. What can you do to me? Jean Luen Hui knew that this incident was no small matter, and he was already planning to act shamelessly. Otherwise, even his master Miao Qingqing, the only person left in the entire Xian continent, would not be able to bear the responsibility of this incident. But then again, the location of this disaster was the Xian continent, and it did not have much to do with the Misty Mansion. The amount of necessities he had obtained this time was considerable, enough to last the Misty Mansion for 10,000 years. So what if the Xian continent really fell? The mountain of men was right in front of him. After crossing this mountain, he would be able to enter the Misty Mansion at any time. At that time, even if they had heaven-defying abilities, they would not be able to do anything to me. Chapter 11:21. The distance of 100 zhang was covered in the blink of an eye for Jean Luen Hui, who was running at full speed. Just as this thought popped up in his mind, he had already charged to within 800 zhang of the area. Just at this moment, the heavens and earth suddenly changed color. An unparalleled sword, bringing with it a huge sword light that connected the heavens and earth, slashed down towards Jean Luen Hui's head. At the same time, a total of 18 spatial shackles were thrown out in quick succession in this entire area. The sword light was like lightning, covering the heavens and earth. In front of this blinding sword light, even the blazing sun in the sky seemed to have lost its color. It became dark and gloomy. This sword light that came out of nowhere was so dazzling and brilliant, as if a bolt of lightning that connected the heavens and earth had suddenly appeared in the deep night sky. Jean Luen Hui, who was focused on escaping, was completely unprepared for this sudden change. The entire world that he could see was instantly filled with this earth-shattering sword light. This sword came out of nowhere, without any warning, and it was hard for anyone to predict and guard against it. Just a moment ago, his heart was filled with the joy of successfully escaping from danger. But now there was only a tyrannical sword light that could kill any existence in front of him. Such a powerful sword was not only decisive, but also decisive, deciding life and death. Life and death were separated by a hair's breadth. Jean Luen Hui was also shocked, but his 10,000 years of experience was not to be underestimated. He quickly reacted and roared, maintaining his speed of movement. But the direction he was moving in suddenly changed, from straight to horizontal, rising by at least 100 zhang. The 18 spatial shackles that Jun Moxie had set up earlier, in hopes of restricting the space he could use to escape to, did not affect Jean Luen Hui at all. He broke through them easily. Not only did he break through the barrier, he even did a spatial leap and rose 100 feet into the air. His speed of charging forward was actually maintained, and he was almost completely unaffected. Luckily, Jean Luen Hui was not a god. Almost unaffected did not mean that he was completely unaffected. In the instant he changed his direction, that brilliant sword light also changed its trajectory. The tip of the sword jumped slightly, and then rose up, charging up like a shadow. Not only did its power not decrease, it even increased. Jean Luen Hui's face darkened, and he finally stood still. If it wasn't for that moment of obstruction, he was confident that he could get rid of this sword principle with his speed. However, if he insisted on escaping, he would be ambushed by the sword light. No matter how fast a person was, it was impossible to be faster than the sword chi released by an expert of the same level. Right now, although there was still no one in front of him, but Jean Luen Hui knew clearly that he had met with a formidable opponent. This person's control over the sword had obviously reached a rather terrifying level. He could be said to have the attainments of a grandmaster. Jean Luen Hui's evaluation of Jun Moxie was obviously very high. Facing such an opponent, if one were to cower in fear, it would undoubtedly cause a flaw in one's perfect mental state. So Jean Luen Hui suddenly stopped charging in the air, and then both his palms met that sword light head-on. The dazzling sword light shot out like a rainbow. His momentum did not change, and he brazenly charged forward. Fire! The palm wind burst out like a mountain torrent. With a boom, it collided with the brilliant sword light. But another change occurred. The Imperial Void sword let out a light cry and suddenly spun rapidly in the air, like a spiral drill, breaking through layer after layer of Jean Luen Hui's palm wind, reaching the throat in an instant. Jean Luen Hui only felt a chill in his throat, and goosebumps rose all over his body from the agitation of the spiraling sword chi. He roared and quickly retreated. Then, he leaped up. He charged a full 500 zhang into the air. At that moment of life and death, he actually broke free from the deadly seal of the sword. After confirming that he was safe, he realized that he was sweating profusely. Luckily, he did not underestimate his opponent just now, and overestimated his opponent as much as possible. He had held back a portion of his strength when he attacked, and was able to retreat in time. Otherwise, this body would have turned into a corpse after that attack. It might not even be a corpse. It would have turned into minced meat or even dust. This was the first time in thousands of years that Jean Luen Hui had encountered such a dangerous situation. It was truly a matter of life and death. That sword drew out another mysterious trajectory that was filled with the laws of heaven and earth, and came charging over fiercely again. It was clear that it was not going to let him off easily. But Jean Luen Hui had already gathered all his xian qi and was ready to strike. Through that exchange just now, he knew that the other party was extremely powerful, but his true cultivation was still lacking compared to him. If they were to fight face to face, he still had a chance of winning. But it was a pity that the only thing that could affect this situation was not that demonic divine sword. Because at this moment, there was a sudden whistling sound in front of him, and a completely black, narrow, sharp sword, mixed with an indescribable evil aura, similarly appeared abruptly in front of him. As if a vengeful ghost was haunting him, endless resentment rose up. This kind of attack, this kind of evil feeling, it was so familiar to Jean Luen Hui. Only someone from that place could have such an attack. 9 serenities and 14 masters? Jean Luen Hui was truly shocked this time. That divine sword had indeed caught him off guard, and he was in a perilous situation. But through that short exchange just now, Jean Luen Hui was certain that he still had the confidence to shake off the owner of that divine sword. But the sudden intervention of the 9 serenities and 14 masters had completely destroyed his confidence. He flipped his hand, and a shining long sword finally appeared in his hand. Even when facing the deadly attacks of all the experts of Heaven's Saint Palace, Jean Luen Hui did not take out his weapon. But now that the 9 nether frost blade appeared, Jean Luen Hui immediately drew his sword. The attack of the 9 serenities and 14 masters was not that easy to take on. Jean Luen Hui had fought with one of the 9 nether young masters before. Even with his high cultivation, he had died several times in that exchange. So he naturally knew how difficult it was to deal with these lunatics. With a loud bang, Jean Luen Hui was forced back several dozen zhang under the pincer attack of the 2 swords. Jun Moxie was also shocked by Jean Luen Hui's cry of 9 serenities and 14 masters. F***ck, it was clearly this young master who attacked you. What has it got to do with that lunatic? But to Jun Dashao, this kind of benign misunderstanding was the more the better. Misunderstanding? The more serious the misunderstanding, the better. If I don't kill him today, then I'll let this fellow fight it out with the 9 serenities and 14 masters another day. Anyway, that fellow has nothing better to do. Since he has nothing better to do, for the safety of the world and the people of the continent, isn't it good to contribute a little? Since when did this young master become so benevolent and righteous? So Jun Moxie became more and more pleased with himself. But he did not say a word, maintaining his invisible state of attack. The 9 nether frost blades in his hands were ever-changing. Sometimes, there were tens of 9 nether frost blades attacking at the same time, causing Jean Luen Hui to howl in frustration. And there was also the blood of yellow flame, which had its own attack consciousness. Jean Luen Hui was instantly suppressed into a disadvantageous position. He could only parry the attacks, and had no way to retaliate. The prerequisite to retaliate was to have a target to retaliate against. But right now, where was the target? And these 2 methods of attack were too strange. It was so strange that even with Jean Luen Hui's vast knowledge and experience, he was completely at a loss about it. Just what kind of attack was this? These 2 types of swords were clearly unleashed using the Imperial Sword technique, but how could the Imperial Sword technique be so agile and have such subtle changes? Previously, the Imperial Void Divine Blade was truly free and unrestrained, advancing and retreating as if it was a living sword. As for the 9 nether frost blade, its changes were even more bizarre, as if it was being personally controlled by someone, but there was clearly no one around. Based on the situation before him, Jean Luen Hui's judgment was very accurate. All the signs pointed to an expert controlling the Imperial Sword technique from afar, and his analysis was not wrong either. The 9 nether frost blade was indeed being controlled by someone, but Jean Luen Hui could not see or sense the person controlling it. As for the blood of yellow flame, this time, Jun Moxie was letting the blood of yellow flame attack on its own. Ever since it had swallowed the blood essence of several Saint Venerables, Jun Moxie had also used the power of gold to refine the blood of yellow flame 3 to 4 times. And now, the blood of yellow flame that had become a peerless divine weapon was actually starting to show off. It was flying around in the Hongjun Pagoda for fun, and it was extremely fast. Furthermore, Jun Mo Xie had used the Hongjun Pagoda's blood essence refinement technique for this latest round of tempering. He had infused all of his understanding of the way of the sword as well as the sword techniques in his memory into it. Did the man understand the sword, or did the sword understand the sword? Jun Mo Xie had provided the most complete and adequate explanation for this problem. This result had caused the blood of yellow flame's Tao of the sword to surpass its master Jun Moxie by a level, and this trend was still expanding. After all, Jun Dashao had too many matters to attend to, and the blood of Yellow Flame had truly nothing but the sword. Every time he saw the crystallization of his blood, sweat, and tears flying around in front of him, displaying many exquisite sword techniques that he couldn't even think of or use, Jun Dashao felt like banging his head against a wall. Could it be that he was trapped in a cocoon of his own making? Damn it, being looked down upon by a sword, how depressing. Right now, the blood of Yellow Flame's intelligence was only at the level of a 14 or 15-year-old youth. But its understanding of the Tao of the sword was something that even those old fellows who had immersed themselves in the Tao of the sword for tens, hundreds, or even thousands of years could not compare to. If the sword demon Duguchiobai was here right now, he would definitely lament under this sword. Since there is Yu, how can there be Liang? Since there is Chiobai, how can there be Yan Huang? I say, I've spent more than 8 hours writing for 2 chapters today. Does anyone believe me? Today is the Dragon Boat Festival. I wish brothers and sisters a happy Dragon Boat Festival. Family reunion. Blissful happiness. Chapter 11:22. The blood of Yellow Flame's strength was shocking, but it was filled with an indescribable dependence on Jun Dashao. To make an analogy, it was like a child who had obtained great power and was showing it off in front of its kin. When Jun Dashao had nothing to do, it would fly out on its own and circle around Jun Dashao twice. Could circle if it wanted, but it just had to circle around Jun Dashao's crotch. And circle around, it was having a lot of fun. The blood of Yellow Flame was having a lot of fun, satisfied, and happy. But a certain someone was even more depressed, even panicking. After all, that place, was it a place for a divine weapon to wander around so casually? It wouldn't even be able to bear a few cuts. Jun Dashao had to forcefully use the sword technique to get this fellow in every time. And this sword technique was like the Monkey King's curse. If not for this thing, Jun Dashao would probably be scared to the point of impotence by this sword. How could he not feel the chill in his heart? How could he not be afraid? That feeling, as a man, who could endure it no one could be an exception. So this time, Jun Moxie directly let go after the sword left his hand. All he did was instill a strand of divine sense into it. This guy is a super baddie. Sword him properly. Take care of him, and there will be heavy rewards. Heavy rewards, these words were extremely tempting to the blood of Yellow Flame. Also, this person in front of me seems to be quite powerful. If I can devour this person's cultivation, how much will this sword improve? So this sword charged forward excitedly, circling around Zhan Luanhui and slashing, stabbing, and stabbing. This person had a sword technique, and no matter how exquisite it was, there would always be a sequence to it. But the path of this sword, no one knew if there were any traces left on the sword, but from the looks of Zhan Luanhui right now, this super expert with 18,000 years of experience had yet to find it. Zhan Luanhui was frantically paying attention to that person wielding the sword from behind. All his attention was focused on that powerful enemy. He completely did not expect that all these attacks were from this sword. He was just wondering, why is the 9 Serenities and 14 Masters so good now? The 9 Nether Frost Blades attack was fine, but the Imperial Void Divine Edge was too sharp, too miraculous, too demonic. Zhan Luanhui's sword danced in the air, and the sounds of clanging and clanging filled the air. The more he fought, the more he felt that this world was changing too quickly. There was actually someone who could wield 2 swords at the same time and use completely different moves. Furthermore, every single one of those moves was extremely complicated, and he had never seen any of them before. If this person was not fighting with him, and he was in such a pathetic state, Zhan Luanhui would have the urge to cheer loudly. This level of swordsmanship was truly at the pinnacle of perfection, and had reached the acme of perfection. The way the 9 Nether Frost Blade was used was exquisite, but there were still minute traces that could be captured. But the sharp moves of that Imperial Void Divine Edge had completely dazzled Zhan Luanhui. There was actually someone who could stab out 1,800 swords in the blink of an eye without the sword moving at all. And every sword was fast and ruthless, accurate and swift. And they were all stabbing in different directions. This sword was aimed at the crown of his head, and the next sword was aimed at his Yonquan meridian. This sword was aimed at his heart, and the next sword was aimed at his back. This sword was like the explosion of thunder, extremely fierce and ferocious, and the next sword was like the spring breeze, extremely gentle. If that was all, it would still be fine. The most terrifying thing was that all the attacks were abnormally balanced, almost completely the same. No, the word almost needed to be removed. It was completely the same. What kind of precise control was required to achieve this? What kind of F***king monster was this sword user? Jean Luen Hui almost wanted to curse out loud. Wasn't this method of attack and control a little too strange? This completely defied logic. Putting himself in Jean Luen Hui's shoes, even for a top expert like him, not to mention the strength of the wrist, arm, and Xian Qi required to stab out 1,000 swords in an instant with the same amount of force, just the constant change of direction of attack, and using a completely different type of energy, was enough to cause an expert like Jean Luen Hui to go berserk several times in an instant. However, the attacks in front of him were actually able to maintain a state of continuous, tide-like, never-ending attacks. It was as if the person wielding the sword did not know fatigue, and did not expend any energy. Or perhaps it was as if he was playing a joke with his own body. Could it be that the martial arts of the 9 Serenities and 14 Masters had reached such a shocking level? In such a short period of time, Jean Luen Hui's body had already been stabbed hundreds of times. If not for the fact that Jean Luen Hui's physical body had already reached a level where even the 7 heavenly tribulations could not damage it, it was 1,000 times denser than steel. Even with the sharpness of the blood of yellow flame, Jean Luen Hui could not pierce through it when he used all his strength and defended with all his might. In fact, if not for this, Jean Luen Hui's physical body would have already turned into a sky full of minced meat. But this kind of consumption was also huge. How many battles had Jean Luen Hui gone through in these dozens of reincarnations? But there had never been a time where he was in such a pathetic state. But right now, he could not vent his anger, because he had no target to vent his anger on. He did not know where the enemy was. There were a few times when he was almost 100% sure that the enemy was behind that sword. But when he attacked with all his might, all his attacks hit thin air. And once Xian Qi was used for defense, then he could not increase his speed at the same time. In the end, he was trapped on the spot. Not only was he unable to move forward, but he was also pushed back by the other party's attacks. Jean Luen Hui's clothes were already in tatters, barely covering his body. What should and shouldn't be exposed was basically all exposed. Actually, this was also within reason. The blood of yellow flame liked to hang around a certain spot, and that spot was a fatal spot of the human body. It was only right to pay more attention to it. One had to admit that this old monster Jean Luen Hui was really impressive. That spot was a place that was extremely difficult to reach with Xian Qi, but it was protected by this old fellow so strongly that even the blood of yellow flame could not damage it. 9 Serenities and 14 Masters. You claim to be the #1 expert in the world. Show yourself if you have the guts. Fight with this old man fair and square. What kind of hero are you, hiding your head and showing your tail like this, displaying some shameful moves? Could it be that your 9 nether lineage only knows these shameful moves? Aren't you afraid of bringing shame to the name of the first young master? Jean Luen Hui scolded loudly. If this was any other time, Jean Luen Hui would not be afraid. It was a mutual consumption of Xian Qi. But with the opponent's high frequency of attacks, the consumption might not be small. And with such a strange attack route, it would further exhaust his stamina and mental energy. Jean Luen Hui was confident that no one in this world could outlast him. But while he was not afraid of this battle, there was a large group of top experts following behind him, and all of them were top experts who were determined to fight him to the death. If he could not resolve this predicament quickly, it would be truly difficult for him to escape when they arrived. June Moxie was in the void, feeling so good that he was about to cry out in satisfaction. But he was still imitating the voice of the 9 serenities and 14 masters, snorting coldly. It was really similar. It was like a gust of cold wind had suddenly blown out from the depths of hell, and also like the sigh of a ghost. Then, June Moxie said coldly, "You think you're worthy? You can't even find this seat's true body, so what right do you have to fight me head-on?" If he had not spoken, Jean Luen Hui would not have been so angry. But June Dashao snorted. This snort made Jean Luen Hui certain of his identity, and so Jean Luen Hui's anger grew, and he could no longer contain it. If he had only snorted, it would have been nothing. But after that snort, he said with the demeanor of an expert, "You think you're worthy?" This sentence drove Jean Luen Hui crazy with anger. What was Jean Luen Hui's identity? In the entire Xian continent, other than Miao Qing, there was no one else who had a higher seniority and a higher status than him. Other than Miao Qing, in terms of Xian Qi cultivation, Jean Luen Hui was the strongest in the entire continent. And Miao Qing could not appear in the world right now, so Jean Luen Hui was the person who stood at the peak of this world. Although the 9 serenities and 14 masters was known as the number 1 in the world, but Jean Luen Hui did not even put him in his eyes. This kind of status, this kind of strength, and yet he was looked down upon to the extreme and said, "You think you're worthy?" Jean Luen Hui roared angrily, almost vomiting blood from anger. With a loud roar, the sword in his hand suddenly turned into thousands of rays of cold light as he counterattacked with all his might. The battle between the two of them became more and more intense, but the entire process did not take long. After all, their speed had already reached a level that ordinary people could not even touch. But with just this one delay, the situation became even more unfavorable to Jean Luen Hui. There was no other reason. The experts of Heaven Saint Palace had already caught up. Gu Han and the rest had chased up with righteous indignation, only to realize that someone had single-handedly provoked Jean Luen Hui and blocked him here. They could not help but feel shocked, followed by disbelief. What kind of person was Jean Luen Hui? Everyone had just exchanged blows with him, so they were all very clear about this point. Although they despised Jean Luen Hui's character to the extreme, but they were all impressed by his cultivation. Previously, even when Gu Han and the rest joined forces, a total of over 34th-level Holy Emperor experts, over a dozen Saint Venerables and 3 or 4 above Saint Venerables, they could only defeat him and not kill him, much less make him stay. They could not even seriously injure him. Chapter 11:23. He was even forced into a disadvantageous position where he could not retaliate at all. And at the same time, the person who intercepted him did not even reveal his shadow. What kind of strength did this person possess? When everyone sensed the 9 nether frost blade and heard Jean Luen Hui's roar, Gu Han and the rest had even more complicated expressions. This person was the 9 serenities and 14 masters. This lunatic. So the true strength of the 9 serenities and 14 masters was actually this powerful. But he had no feud with Jean Luen Hui, so why did he obstruct a super expert like Jean Luen Hui? This was tantamount to giving a huge favor to his enemies. Gu Han, the leader of the group, felt even more complicated. But he also knew that this was not the time to consider this. Jean Luen Hui had destroyed the restrictions, causing the Pillar of Heaven's mountains to completely collapse, and even caused the volcanoes to erupt. The 10,000 years of foundation of the 3 Holy Lands was completely destroyed, and the most terrifying consequence was that the natural barrier that blocked the invasion of the strange races was completely gone. All of this was destroyed by Jean Luen Hui's reckless actions. After fighting with Jun Moxie for so long, there were quite a number of deaths. But it was not as thorough and tragic as Jean Lun Hui's. More than half of the people of the three Holy Lands had died in this calamity. Among the three Holy Lands, the Hermitage bore the brunt of it. Countless beautiful palaces had already turned into a sea of lava. Other than Mo Wudao, who led less than 400 people out, no one else survived. The illusory Blood Sea was not in a good state either. It was smashed by the collapsing Pillar of Heaven's mountains, and almost entirely smashed onto it. Sect Master Huyen Ao Bo only managed to escape with his life under the protection of several experts of his sect. However, there were less than 500 people who escaped with him. Half of them were injured and crippled. It was even more miserable than the elusive world of immortals. The servants and family members of the two Holy Lands numbered in the tens of thousands, but not a single one escaped. Including the old and the young, men and women, they were all turned into scorched earth and smoke. Among them, there were many experts who perished in this calamity in order to save their families. The Great Golden City was located slightly further away. It could be said that they were lucky enough to be less affected. Although there were many casualties in the process, the overall loss of combat power was not too big. More than 2,000 masters who were the main battle masters managed to escape. 10,000 years of foundation destroyed in a day. Tens of thousands of experts died a violent death. Even in the Heaven Saint Palace of the Heaven Saint Mountain, 2 of the Holy Emperor's experts perished because of this sudden disaster. Not a single stock of spirit medicine survived. 10,000 years of accumulation turned into nothingness. The Ling Long Lotus Pond also collapsed and turned into ashes. What a disastrous loss this was. It was often said that it was good as long as there were people. But the things that the Heaven Saint Palace and the three Holy Lands possessed were truly more precious than talents. And this accident happened a month before the war for seizing the heavens. This was equivalent to announcing the death penalty of the entire Xian continent. The billions of lives of the Xian continent were about to be completely exposed to the bloody butcher knives of the strange races. The three Holy Lands, as the mainstays of the continent, had their combat power weakened by more than 80% before the war, and that natural moat that separated the two lands had now become a smooth road. All of this was caused by Jean Lun Hui. This level of hatred could no longer be described as irreconcilable. This was a blood feud that could not be resolved for generations to come. The hearts of everyone from the three Holy Lands were dripping blood. Even if they had to go to the ends of the world, Gu Han and the rest would never let Jean Lun Hui off. Zhan Kuang, this main culprit. Gu Han waved his hand, and the peak experts from the Heaven Saint Palace who had rushed over formed a large circle, surrounding the two people who were fighting. Everyone looked at Jean Lun Hui with eyes filled with crazed hatred. However, the battle that unfolded in front of them immediately attracted everyone's attention. A battle between one person and 3 swords. Or rather, it could be said that a battle between one person wielding 1 sword and 2 other swords. Oh no, to be more accurate, it should be a battle with a group of swords. Jean Lun Hui, who was almost naked and had disheveled hair, was dancing in the air alone, shouting loudly. His sword light was like lightning, like rain, like a waterfall. In front of his body, a sword flew here and there, occasionally releasing a rain of swords, attacking Jean Lun Hui in a frenzied manner. And a black 9 nether frost blade would appear from time to time. Every attack would land on the weakest spot of Jean Lun Hui's defense. From start to end, there was no one controlling them. But these 2 swords were clearly controlled by someone in the dark, and it was an extremely skilled sword expert. It was a miraculous sword manipulation technique. This level of precise control. Looking at the ever-changing attacks, Gu Han and the rest all sucked in a cold breath of air, feeling ashamed of their inferiority. And every attack of that majestic divine blade seemed to be infused with the essence of the way of the sword. Every time he spun around, every time he dodged, there was a mysterious and indescribable feeling to it. No one would be able to withstand such an attack that was filled with the laws of heaven and earth. Even if he was the existence closest to the pinnacle of this world. Everyone watched silently as the battle unfolded. Their hearts were in turmoil. If not for the fact that Jean-Louis Huey's defenses had reached an unbelievable level, he would have died long ago. And in such a situation, if he failed to defend, he would be smashed into smithereens. But the situation of the battle was not optimistic. The 9 serenities and 14 masters who was controlling the swords in the dark was undoubtedly powerful, but his weakness was also exposed. Clearly, his skills were not as profound as Jean-Louis Huey's. The final winner of this battle of attrition might not be him. It was obvious that his skills were not as profound as Jean-Louis Huey's. The final winner of this war of attrition might not be him. This battle was filled with the color of supremacy. Be it Jean-Louis Huey or that sword, both had an air of arrogance. Both Jean-Louis Huey and that sword exuded an air of arrogance. The aura they exuded and the aura they exuded clearly showed this. No one could interfere. No one could interfere. Anyone who interfered would become the common enemy of both sides. And in truth, there was no room for a third party to interfere in a battle like this. It was understandable that Jean-Louis Huey was afraid of being surrounded and attacked by everyone. But why was that imperial void divine sword also emitting such a cold and hostile aura? If everyone rushed up to take care of Jean-Louis Huey at this moment, not only would it be a happy ending, it would also be the easiest way to resolve the situation with the least number of variables. A battle of attrition would only lead to countless unforeseen circumstances. But facing that powerful divine blade, no one dared to interfere. Once they interfered, it would mean that they were looking down on the sword master. The experts of Heaven Saint Palace did not dare to offend this Grandmaster of the Way of the Sword at this critical juncture. A certain Grandmaster of the Way of the Sword, Jun Moxie, was about to explode from anger. Jun Dashao had never been one to follow the rules of the pugilistic world. As long as he could defeat his enemy, that was the best method. Therefore, sneak attacks, plots, poisons, and other despicable methods were not too stressful for him. If the blood of Yellow Flame was in his hands, Jun Dashao would have already raised his arms and shouted, "Everyone attack together, chop this old fellow into pieces." But right now, the blood of Yellow Flame was attacking on its own. Although it was stronger than in his hands, this fellow was still arrogant. To actually be so particular about the demeanor of a gentleman, and talk about a fair battle, and he seemed to be excited to see the prey. He even seemed to be repulsed by the 9 nether frost blade in Jun Moxie's hands. And the most infuriating thing was that this fellow wanted to fight Jean-Louis alone. He was afraid that he wouldn't be able to monopolize it. Big brother, this is a war, ah! What kind of heroism are you trying to show? Among everyone here, only you can absorb the essence of a Xian Qi cultivator. Jun Moxie glared furiously. If not for the fact that he was afraid of exposing his identity, he would have already screamed out loud. He decided in his heart, after this battle, I'll definitely teach the blood of Yellow Flame a good lesson and let him properly understand the spirit. At such a crucial moment, to drop the ball and be so stubborn, Jun Moxie sighed deeply. Actually, Jun Dashao was also clear that this result was caused by him, and he couldn't blame anyone else. It was already described in the Hongjun Pagoda. The saber is the emperor of all weapons, the sword is the monarch of all weapons. A dignified and imposing sword is the sword of a gentleman. A dignified teacher must not take risks and do things that are treacherous. There are thousands of weapons in the world, but only the sword can be called a gentleman. The sword of a gentleman is arrogant, proud and aloof under the heavens, looking down on the wind and clouds. It is the supreme emperor of the sword. When the sword is used, it is dignified. The tricks of the treacherous sword may be successful for a while, but it will not be able to dominate the world. Remember, the blood of yellow flame could be said to have fully digested, understood, and absorbed the concept of the gentleman of the sword. And it even carried it to greater heights. That was why the blood of yellow flame divine sword was so tyrannical in this battle. Jean Louis roared madly and suddenly leaped up, completely out of character. He completely ignored the terrifying attack of the Void Ward divine sword and leaped up without a care for anything. The blood of yellow flame had already cut 7 wounds on his body in an instant. Before the blood could even flow out, the wounds had already healed. June Moxie's 9 nether frost blade had also stabbed him 3 times from top to bottom. A stab to the forehead, a stab to the heart, and a stab to the dantian. But they only went 3 inches in before they were repelled. Then the skin that was pierced also returned to its original state in an instant. Jean Louis charged 100 zhang and suddenly roared into the sky. His black hair blew up as he stood motionlessly in the air with his hands behind his back, looking down coldly at the 2 swords that were charging up. He said expressionlessly, "Very good. 9 serenities and 14 masters. You have really succeeded in angering me this time. In the last 10,000 years, there has never been anyone who could make this old man look so pathetic and disheveled. You should be proud to be able to do this. Even if you die today, you will not have wasted your position as the #1 expert of the Xian continent." Chapter 11:24. Jean Louis' long black hair flew in the air, like seaweed at the bottom of the sea that had encountered a tsunami. His eyes were like lightning, his face expressionless, but a tyrannical aura rose from his body. He was almost completely naked, with only a few strands of cloth hanging on his body. He should have looked extremely wretched in this state, but Jean Louis had regained his majestic aura, like a god descending to the mortal world. This godly and demonic aura only took less than 1/10 of the time it took to blink an eye from the moment it appeared to spread throughout the world. But the entire space within a 10,000 li radius was filled with this extremely domineering aura. "Since you've gone too far, this old man shall give you a taste of my prowess. Let you understand that there's always someone stronger than you out there." Jean Louis smiled languidly. His body suddenly spun, and a tornado formed under his feet. It was like a tyrannosaurus had charged out from the ground, sweeping through the heavens and wrapping everything within it. The tornado rose, and a greenish-blue aura burst out from Jean Louis' body. Suddenly, thousands of Jean Louis' shadows appeared in the world. "It's the heaven-mad battle dragon. Retreat quickly." Gu Han's face changed as he called out. The heaven-mad battle dragon was the move that made Jean Louis famous when he was still Jean Quang. The power of this move was said to be unparalleled. Jean Louis had once used this move to fight against the 9 nether young masters, and he had the upper hand. The greatest power of this move was that it could create countless cracks in the space around it. As long as one was hit by it, no matter which crack they fell into, they would not be able to return. Even if it was someone stronger than Jean Louis, they would be at a disadvantage if they met with this move. Back then, it was Jean Quang's move that made Jean Louis an absolute forbidden move. This move was also Jean Quang's ultimate killing move. Although the 9 nether 14th young master who was fighting with Jean Louis was an enemy of the 3 Holy Lands, it was precisely because he had stopped Jean Louis that the people of Heaven Saint Palace had successfully formed an encirclement. On this point, the people of Heaven Saint Palace had undoubtedly owed him a huge favor. Thus, Gu Han could not sit back and watch. But the huge tornado that Jean Louis had formed suddenly exploded in the next moment. Due to the explosion, the countless light spots that appeared instantly evolved into countless pitch-black spatial cracks in the area where the power of the explosion spread across the entire world. It was filled with the aura of death and destruction. At the same time, the countless Jean Huey's shadows surged out from all directions, attacking indiscriminately without a target. The area covered by the blood of Yellow Flame and the 9 Nether Frostblade was extremely vast. Jean Huey's goal was simple. As long as they were within this area, they were destined to not be able to escape this wave of attacks. No one could control a sword to attack from 1,000 feet away and still be so agile. Not even Miao Qingqing could do it. If there was really someone who could do this, then that person was definitely not a human, but a god. As long as he was alone, he would not be able to escape from Jean Huey's attack. But once the target's position was found, no matter how well you hid, you would still be the focus of all the attacks. There was a loud explosion. Countless shockwaves shot out in all directions. Even the encirclement formed by Gu Han and the rest of the 3 Holy Lands was blown away by the shockwaves of this attack, and had no choice but to scatter far away. As expected, the 2 swords completely disappeared in an instant. Jean Hui, who was still in a sorry state, stood proudly in the center. His divine sense swept through the area, and he couldn't help but smile. That was the satisfied smile of a victor. This attack had basically achieved its intended goal. Although it was unable to completely destroy the 9 Nether 14th Young Master, it had at least temporarily escaped from the entanglement of those 2 strange swords. Furthermore, it had completely destroyed the encirclement that the Heaven Saint Palace had set up. His chances of escaping had greatly increased. As long as he could escape, nothing else would be a problem. The tornado that was formed from the Heaven-Mad Battle Dragon was still wreaking havoc in the world. After a while, it slowly converged, turning into a faint gray dragon beside Jean Hui, twisting up and down. But Jean Huey's body was abnormally clear as he stood in the void. His almost naked body did not look the slightest bit wretched at this moment, only exuding a domineering aura that looked down upon the heavens and earth. His eyes swept across Gu Han and the rest emotionlessly. Without saying a word, he turned his gaze away. At this moment, the pitch-black spatial cracks that appeared due to the Heaven-Mad Battle Dragon's move quietly closed up, restoring the clear skies under the eruption of the volcano. That Heaven-Mad Battle Dragon just now had blocked out everything in this world. This was truly the legendary move of the gods. Gu Han and the rest of the experts from Heaven Saint Palace were ashen. Everyone had heard of how powerful the legendary Heaven-Mad Battle Dragon was, but they had never imagined that it would be this powerful. Jean Huey's strength had clearly reached a level that could shock the world. If this Heaven-Mad Battle Dragon had been used on them, only 2 or 3 people would be able to escape, while the rest would all be lost in the spatial turbulence. Not to say that they would all be wiped out. And that indifferent look from Jean Hui just now, although he did not say anything, but the deterrence and warning in it was obvious. Facing this enemy, they had gathered so many people, but they were powerless to stop him. In Jean Huey's current situation, he clearly still had the energy to spare. He could use the Heaven-Mad Battle Dragon again. Even the 9 Serenities and 14 Masters who had single-handedly pushed Jean Hui into a disadvantageous position had vanished into thin air. The 2 swords that shone with a light that could illuminate the past and the present had now returned to nothingness. How could they fight against such a powerful enemy? Even if they had the heart to fight to the death, it was all futile. Far away, the volcano was still erupting with lava and flames. The terrifying consequences of Jean Huey's actions were still ongoing. But facing Jean Hui, everyone felt an inexplicable sense of helplessness. Jean Hui laughed coldly, his hands behind his back as he floated forward. Gu Han's body shook. Blazing sparks shot out of his eyes. That was the determination to fight with his life on the line. That cold laughter from Jean Hui had undoubtedly ignited all the blood in his body. Kill. Even if we have to perish together with this bastard, we must not let him off. Gu Han's eyes were bloodshot as he raised his arms and roared. Kill! A loud roar rang out. A total of over 50 top experts all charged towards Jean Luen Hui without a care for their own lives. Jean Luen Hui laughed coldly as he opened his arms. A ball of black light slowly formed in his hands. His long hair flew back and his eyes shone fiercely. Since you 3 Holy Lands insist on seeking your own destruction, then I shall grant you your wish. Anyway, your juniors are basically all dead in this calamity. I shall send you off to reunite. Ha ha. Just as he was about to attack, another change had occurred. This change was beyond everyone's expectations. The brilliant sword light flashed again, and it was still the same resplendent sword light from before. This sword, there was no turning back once it was unleashed. With an indescribable sense of awe and determination, the sword pierced into Jean Luen Hui's chest with the force of a shooting star. At the same time, it also shattered the ball of light that had formed in his palms. Jean Luen Hui roared. But this sword did not stop at all. It continued to push forward with an extremely powerful force. In this instant, Jean Luen Hui had gathered all his Xian Qi on his chest. That sword had only entered 3 inches into his flesh before it was stopped by the crazy Xian Qi and could not go any further. But Jean Luen Hui's entire body was also unable to withstand such a powerful force. His entire back was protruding outwards. His head and feet were on a parallel line. Under the ferocious attack of this unstoppable sword, he rapidly retreated like a meteor chasing after the moon. In midair, a sword shot out thousands of cold rays, pushing a person back rapidly. In this instant, be it the sword or the person, they were both emitting thousands of rays of light. With a loud bang, an expert from Heaven's Saint Palace struck Jean Luen Hui's back with his sword. But with a loud bang, he turned into minced meat. The sword also turned into metal shards, flashing in the air and disappearing without a trace. Such a flaw that could not be defended against had instead become a weapon that could kill the enemy? Jean Luen Hui's skills had truly reached an unbelievable height. Jean Luen Hui let out a deafening roar. He tried his best to stabilize his body that was rapidly retreating, but he was currently in midair. Although he could barely ensure that his body would not be pierced by this godlike and demonic sword, he had nowhere to borrow strength from. In the end, he was unable to resist the opponent's extremely ferocious impact. Gu Han's eyes brightened. He was not afraid of the fact that one of his companions had died because he had interfered. Instead, he swung the sword in his hand and with a loud roar, he stabbed Jean Luen Hui's chest. Similarly, he did not seek to kill the enemy, but to push him back. In this instant, Gu Han had already understood the meaning of this 9 serenities and 14 masters. With Jean Luen Hui's profound skills, he had already reached a height that no human could kill. If he wanted to kill him, there was only another way. And right now, there was only one way to kill Jean Luen Hui, and that was to push this human scum into the crater of the volcano. The volcano was opened because of you, Jean Luen Hui, then you, Jean Luen Hui, shall be buried by the volcano. Jean Luen Hui was pushed by 2 huge forces, gradually approaching the crater of the volcano. His eyes looked like they were about to spit out fire, as if he wanted to burn the world. But in this situation, he had already lost the initiative, and that godly move, the heaven-mad battle dragon, had already gathered twice. He was powerless to strike again, and this was his weakest moment. Chapter 11:25. The 2 long swords in his heart were like rocket propellers, pushing Jean Luen Hui with all their might, keeping his head and feet parallel to each other as he flew backwards at high speed. Like lightning. It was truly like a falling meteor, getting closer and closer to the crater of the volcano. Gu Han used all his strength, pouring all his Xian Qi into his swords and pushing them. His robes were already starting to smoke, but his eyes were still resolute. His hatred was still there. Even if he had to perish together with this great calamity, Gu Han would have no regrets. Jean Luen Hui could clearly feel the extreme heat that could melt gold and rock, burning everything, getting closer and closer. He couldn't help but howl in rage. But there was nothing he could do. In the dark, Jun Moxie gritted his teeth, continuing to push the blood of yellow flame in his hands. This old monster had already suffered no less than 1,000 sword attacks from him. But his own cultivation was not up to par yet, and there was no way he could kill him. If he wanted to kill him, this was indeed the only way. Within the Hongjun Pagoda, Mei Shui Yen continued to run and leap into the distance. Then, she flew back fiercely and slammed into Jun Mosie's back. This repeated over and over again, and with every collision, Jun Mosie's speed would increase. Xiao! With a sharp whistle, another Saint Venerable from Heaven's Saint Palace flew over like a cannonball, slamming into Gu Han's back. This caused Gu Han's momentum to not weaken, and his speed to become even more ferocious. But although their methods were similar to Mei Shuiyen's, there was actually a fundamental difference. Mei Shuiyen could be considered the person who understood Jun Moxie's cultivation the best in the world. She had already calculated the amount of force that Jun Moxie could withstand, and would not put too much of a burden on Jun Moxie. Furthermore, Jun Dashao had been transformed by the Hongjun Pagoda several times. His physical body was so strong that it could be considered unparalleled in the world. He was also proficient in the technique of using Little Liang to move 1,000 jin. Although he had been hit many times, he had not been injured. But it was different for Gu Han's side. Gu Han had already poured all of his life's worth of cultivation into his saber, and his protective profound energy had already been lowered to its lowest point. But the Heaven Saint Palace expert who was charging at him from behind was afraid that he would not use his full strength, so he desperately rushed forward. Although he had succeeded in increasing the momentum of his charge, it had also caused Gu Han to sustain more and more injuries, and the burden on his body had inevitably become greater and greater. Gu Han spat out a mouthful of blood, but he still gritted his teeth and roared, again. Gu Han hated Jean Luen Hui to the core, and felt that he had to be eliminated no matter if it was in the world, in the country, or in himself. He already had the intention to perish together with Jean Luen Hui. Although his injuries were getting more and more serious, he did not care about his own safety at all and kept urging Jean Luen Hui. With the continuous double impact, Jean Luen Hui's body was less than 200 zhang away from the nearest volcano, and this kind of distance was almost to the core of the erupting volcano. Gu Han's clothes had already turned into ashes under the high temperature. His hair was also curling, emitting green smoke, and then turning into ashes and flying away. Jean Luen Hui roared madly, blood spurting out of his mouth continuously. He had clearly used some kind of self-mutilating secret technique to raise his cultivation and resist with all his might, hoping that he could escape from this deadly predicament. He was getting closer and closer to the volcano, but his momentum was getting slower and slower. If this continued, Jean Luen Hui might even be able to escape at the last moment before he entered the volcano. Although the temperature there was also a few thousand degrees, but with Jean Luen Hui's skills, he would still be able to escape. Getting closer and closer, Jun Moxie, who was hidden in the void, finally revealed a look of anxiety on his face. Gu Han's face was filled with grief and indignation. The two of them, including Mei Shuiyen in the Hongjun Pagoda, had already given it their all. But right now they had already entered a restricted area. The people behind them could no longer help. If they insisted on helping, no matter which one of them came, they would only end up losing their lives. Because this place was too close to the volcano. If they acted rashly, they would not be helping, but sending themselves to death. Another 10 zhang. It was only 100 feet away, but the fiery red magma was right in front of him, almost within reach. It was still spewing furiously into the sky. At this time, there were already countless fiery red rocks falling from the sky, hitting Gu Han and Jean Luen Hui. Gu Han's skin had already started to wrinkle and smoke, but Jean Luen Hui's retreat had already been stopped. He slowly raised his head with all his might, the corners of his mouth cracked into a sinister smile. Although his back was also starting to smoke, all the muscles on his body were almost roasted dry by the scorching lava. But in the end, he stopped retreating. There was only a distance of 10 zhang. In the past, even an Earth Xian expert or Tian Xian would be able to reach this distance. But right now, it had become an insurmountable distance. Behind them, the experts from Heaven's Saint Palace who had been following them with all their might also realized this. Instantly, several people jumped out in agitation. Just like Gu Han, they wanted Jean Luen Hui dead. For this goal, they were willing to pay any price, including their own lives. One of them shouted, "Everyone, stop fighting! Stop! Let me do it!" Without waiting for anyone to reply, he leaped up and bent his legs. Quick! All the experts from Heaven's Saint Palace were filled with grief and indignation, tears rolling down their faces. But now was not the time to be sentimental. Everyone here had at least 1,000 years of experience. How could they not know that this was a critical moment? As long as there was a slight delay, even if it was in the blink of an eye, the situation would be reversed. There was no time to grieve. Everyone roared angrily with tears in their eyes. They gathered all their strength and unleashed it at the same time, landing a heavy blow on this person's legs. At the same time, this Saint Venerable's legs kicked back. Borrowing the strength of everyone, he flew out like a cannonball, almost in midair, because of the high temperature and the friction in the air caused by the high speed. He had already started to burn. He had turned into a ball of fire. Before Jean Luen Hui's sinister smile could turn into shock, that person's body had already slammed into him with a loud bang. This Saint Venerable expert used all his strength to lock Jean Luen Hui in place with his arms, wrapping around his body. This powerful and unstoppable force carried the two bundled-up bodies and Jean Luen Hui's indignant howl as they crossed the last 100 feet of space and charged into the crater of the volcano. Fourth brother Ah! Gu Han screamed, feeling as though a knife was being twisted in his heart. As for Jun Mo Xie and Gu Han, they were still using all their strength. With Jean Luen Hui's disappearance, Jun Mo Xie and Gu Han suddenly lost the huge resistance in front of them and fell towards the mouth of the volcano. They were about to be buried with them. Gu Han closed his eyes, a smile on his face. To die like this, although there was still some regret, it was enough. Behind him, everyone exclaimed in shock. In the blazing light of the volcano, a figure flashed and Gu Han disappeared. The entire world returned to silence. Everyone's hearts were filled with grief and agony. Although Jean Luen Hui had died, he had also lost Gu Han, and it seemed like that 9 serenities and 14 masters who had never appeared had also died here. Suddenly, with an almost heart-wrenching roar, a figure, with bright red magma all over his body, flew out of the crater at a high speed. With a heart-wrenching howl, his entire body flipped and tumbled down from the other side of the volcano. Then he completely disappeared. Jean Luen Hui. He had clearly fallen into the volcano, but he still had the strength to jump out. Jean Luen Hui, in the nick of time, did not hesitate to ignite his own soul, releasing the seal on his soul that had lasted for thousands of years. In that instant, he reached the pinnacle of his cultivation and finally charged out from the mouth of the volcano. But his physical body was destroyed. Although Zhan Kuang's reincarnated soul did not dissipate, but Jean Luen Hui's body could no longer be used. Jean Luen Hui's soul was sealed because he was afraid that his current body would not be able to withstand the power of his soul and explode once it was released. But now, he had no other choice. If he didn't release the seal, only death awaited him. He had to choose the lesser of two evils. So he chose to release the seal and release Zhang Kuang's original soul. Finally escaped the calamity of the volcano. Even so, Zhan Luanhui had expended a lot of energy in this battle. Not only was his physical body destroyed, even his soul was half destroyed. Whether or not he could keep his life was still an unknown. In the midst of everyone's shock, they saw another figure flying out from the direction of the volcano, heading towards where they were. As they flew closer, they discovered to their surprise that this person was Gu Han. Gu Han, who was clearly going to die, was actually not dead, and his physical body did not suffer much damage. Because Jun Moxie did not reveal himself, although the temperature of the volcano was high, it did not affect him much. So at the last moment, Jun Dashao grabbed Gu Han and threw him into the Hongjun Pagoda. Dashao still had some sympathy for Gu Han. Gu Han had already harbored the conviction that he would die, and closed his eyes to await his death. His wish having been fulfilled, he did not have too many regrets. Who knew that at the last instant when the extreme heat was about to reach him, the heat completely disappeared, and he seemed to have arrived in a strange space. He could not help but be shocked. He was about to open his eyes to look around, but he was already thrown out again. When he opened his eyes again, he realized that he was already surrounded by the people of Heaven Saint Palace, less than 1,000 zhang away from the volcano. He had truly escaped death. In fact, the moment Zhan Luanhui rushed out of the volcano, Jun Moxie had already flown over with the Yin-Yang escape. This battle with Zhan Luanhui had given Jun Moxie too many warnings. Today's update is complete. Chapter 11:26. There's actually an unkillable expert in this world. To think that there really is an unkillable expert in this world. Even with the sharpness of the blood of yellow flame that had been enhanced several times, it was still unable to break through his physical defenses. And this body was at most a body that Zhan Luanhui had taken over, and not his original body. If he really recovered to his peak, what kind of terrifying level would he reach? This time, it was because he was too guilty and was in a hurry to escape, and was caught off guard by Jun Mosie's sudden interception. And he was able to obtain victory in the end, because everyone in Heaven Saint Palace disregarded their own lives and gave their all to help him. And Gu Han and the others disregarded their own lives to assist him. And he also had Mei Shuyan's full support in the Hongjun Pagoda. And someone like Zhan Luanhui was willing to destroy the countless lives of the Xian continent for the sake of the Zhan family. Such an ambitious person, if he was allowed to continue living in this world, it would undoubtedly be a huge disaster. If this person really wanted to become enemies with the evil monarch manor, no one in the entire evil monarch manor would be able to escape his pursuit other than himself. Even the mouth of the volcano could not take his life. And he could still jump out. This is 2F** King terrifying. And right now, the evil monarch manor had already completely offended the Zhan family. Zhan Luanhui, this extremely powerful existence, had undoubtedly become a huge matter that could affect the final outcome of both sides. After witnessing Zhan Luanhui's terrifying prowess, Jun Moxie was certain of one thing. If Zhan Luanhui did not die, he would not be able to eat or sleep in peace. Right now, he was heavily injured, and his soul was about to be destroyed. This was a heaven-sent opportunity. Take his life while he's down. He rushed past the mouth of the volcano, rushing towards the place where Zhan Luanhui had fallen. Below them was a sea of magma. It was the center of the 6 volcanoes that had erupted. This was originally a basin, but right now it was filled with lava. Jun Moxie searched around the volcanoes for a long time before finally finding Zhan Luanhui's corpse. How could they be sure that this body belonged to Zhan Luanhui? This sudden calamity had already killed tens of thousands of people. The reason was simple. There were countless corpses drowned in the lava, but in this vast sea of lava, there was only one corpse left. Only a freak like Zhan Luanhui, an undying old monster, could temporarily resist the invasion of the magma after his origin spirit left his body. At least it lasted until June Moxie found the skeleton. After searching through the corpse, June Moxie did not waste any time, stabbing the blood of yellow flame into the magma-covered skeleton. The blood of yellow flame let out a disappointed cry, leaping up listlessly. June Moxie sighed. Although there was nothing wrong with the body, the soul was gone. This corpse was just a shell. Even if it was thrown away, it would be useless except for staining the ground. Jean Luanhui, no, it should be said that Jean Kuang's soul had already escaped. This time, it would be even harder to find him. No one would know which body the old monster Jean Kuang would forcefully burrow his soul into. After the death of the Holy Emperor, there was a chance for a spirit seed to be born. After the death of a saint venerable, his soul would transform into a holy infant. Both of these could not be taken over directly. They could only choose to possess the body of a newborn baby. But Jean Luanhui's soul, which had surpassed the level of experts in this world, had already surpassed the above category and could be taken over directly. And this soul could still retain a considerable amount of battle power. As long as it was given some time, its strength would increase tremendously. In the cultivation world, this kind of situation would be known as a loose immortal. And if the body that he took over was not bad, he would have the chance to make a comeback and reach the peak again. June Moxie let out a long sigh. With such a coincidence, such a heaven-sent opportunity, and such an advantageous situation, it was truly a great pity that he was still unable to completely eliminate this most terrifying enemy. But since things had already come to this, there was nothing more he could do. With a thought, he disappeared into that boundless sea of lava. The surviving experts of the 3 Holy Lands looked at each other, all in a state of great surprise and worry. The surprise was that an almost invincible and undefeatable enemy like Jean Luanhui had died just like that. The worry was that now that the 3 Holy Lands were almost annihilated, how were they going to deal with the war for seizing the heavens later? It could even be said that the war for seizing the heavens no longer had much meaning, because the pillar of heaven's mountains had already collapsed, and the natural barrier was no longer there. The strange races could invade the Xian continent. With the strange races' personality, did they really hope that they would abide by the agreement and fight the war for seizing the heavens? Were they really going to become the greatest sinners of history? After the joy of defeating a powerful enemy, everyone looked at the volcanoes that were still spewing flames in a daze. Everyone's hearts were in a mess. Just at this time, a figure flashed before them. A white-robed youth appeared before them. Chu Wu Hui's eyes narrowed. June Moxie. The others also recognized this audacious youth, who had almost fought with them on Mount Heaven Saint. Everyone's memory is really good. June Mo Xie boasted shamelessly. Then, his face turned serious and he asked, "Is there anyone who can tell me what exactly happened here? How did the pillar of heaven's mountains become like this?" As he said that, he gestured at the volcanoes around them. "Isn't it all because of Jean Luanhui, that damned bastard?" Cheng Yinshao sighed and suddenly rolled his eyes. "You've come at the right time. We've just finished our battle with Jean Luanhui and you're already here. Have you been watching from the side? Was that battle exciting?" Hearing Cheng Yinzhao's words, everyone's faces turned ugly. Everyone was well aware of how dangerous that battle was. June Moxie's appearance was so coincidental that it was impossible for it to be just a coincidence. The battle earlier could be said to be earth-shattering. Even if June Moxie was really on his way here, once he sensed that shocking aura, he would definitely have rushed to the scene to understand the situation. There was no way he would be late. Could it be that this lad had really been watching from the sidelines? Hoping that both sides would be heavily injured so that he could reap the benefits. June Moxie pursed his lips and snorted coldly. Watch from the side? Exciting? This seat did want to watch from the side, but the show that you guys put on was not exciting at all. So I had no choice but to do it myself. If not for this seat's exciting performance, not to mention keeping Jean Hui here, all of you would have died in that volcano. Jun Mosier sneered as he finished speaking. He then flipped his wrist, and an awe-inspiring sword appeared in his hand. It flickered with a cold flame. As soon as the sword appeared, a disdainful, arrogant, and condescending aura immediately appeared in the world. It was as if all the experts in the world were as insignificant as ants in front of this sword. It was the demon-like Imperial Void Divine Blade. The sword that had attacked Jean Hui earlier. It was also the divine sword that had forced Jean Hui into the mouth of the volcano with a single sword. Then, Jun Moxie flipped his left hand and another cold black blade appeared in his hand. It blinked coldly, as if a soul was sighing softly. It was the 9 Netherfrost blade. Could it be that the one who fought with Jean Hui earlier was not the 9 Serenities and 14 Masters, but you, Jun Moxie? Everyone exclaimed in disbelief, their faces alternating between red and white. So the other party was the main force of this battle, the key person in killing Jean Hui. And they were the ones who did not contribute much, and now they were accused of being the one who had contributed the most, watching from the side. This was not a small misunderstanding. In that moment all the experts were too ashamed to show their faces. They were not Mo Wudao. Their skin was not so thick. Forget it, let's not talk about these meaningless things. Let's go down and talk. At this crucial moment, Jun Moxie did not take things too far and said lightly. After chasing for such a long time, even though all of them possessed peerless strength, they still felt a little tired. In particular, the exhaustion of their mental strength was even more severe. It would not be an exaggeration to say that they were both mentally and physically exhausted. Most importantly, this place was really not a good place to talk. Under Jun Moxie's suggestion, everyone moved out of the radius of the volcano. Although it was still extremely hot outside, with everyone's strength, it was no longer a burden. The remaining experts of the Heaven Saint Palace all had extremely ugly expressions on their faces. They looked at each other. In that moment, no one knew what to say. With a sigh, Gu Han, who was on the brink of death, struggled to stand up. Panting heavily, he said, "Manor Lord Jun, I believe you have seen the current situation clearly. The situation is extremely grim, so this old man will not say any courteous words of gratitude. I can only briefly explain what Manor Lord Jun is most interested to know." Jun Moxie nodded. A figure flashed, and Mei Shuiyan suddenly appeared in front of everyone. Everyone was shocked once again. They could not understand how the evil monarch was able to conceal himself and participate in the battle, and now they saw the Lord of Tian Fa, Mei Shuiyan, suddenly appear in such a strange manner. But everyone knew that this was not the time to be shocked. They could only forcefully suppress it. But the bewilderment in their eyes was obvious. Mei Shuiyan had been concealing herself in the Hongjun Pagoda the entire time. Although she had some understanding of the outside world, it was not accurate. Now that she saw everyone's miserable state, although she was mentally prepared, she was still shocked. But under Jun Moxie's gaze, she forcefully suppressed it. Behind everyone, Qiao Ying stood silently. Her eyes were lifeless, and her face was pale. Only when she saw Jun Moxie for the first time did her eyes brighten for a moment. But after that they dimmed again. For more than 1,000 years, Qiao Ying had been in charge of all the spirit herbs, spirit roots, and spirit sprouts of Heaven Saint Palace, including the exquisite lotus. It could be said that these precious plants were all of Qiao Ying's spiritual sustenance. But now all of them had been destroyed. It was equivalent to destroying all of Qiao Ying's spiritual sustenance for the past 1,000 years. Chapter 11:27. Seeing that everyone had sat down, she subconsciously followed them and sat down. However, her eyes were empty, as if she no longer existed. Gu Han sucked in a deep breath. His entire body glowed with light, and the strange colors of his profound energy lit up from black, then red, green, all the way until it became a colorless jade color. After flashing dozens of different colors, he finally spat out a mouthful of thick black blood with a pu sound. Then, his damaged and festering skin and the charred half of his body slowly fell off his body bit by bit. After the scars fell off, what was revealed was white and tender new flesh. If it was an ordinary person, they would have died countless times from such serious injuries. However, he had completely recovered in such a short time. At least on the surface, there were no major problems. His injuries were no longer serious, but his appearance was. Previously, Old Man Gu had cooperated with Jun Moxie to force Jean Luan to fall back into the mouth of the volcano. He had exerted all his martial arts into the impact, causing his defense to fall to the lowest point. His clothes and whatnot were all burnt, but even his hair and eyebrows were damaged. Just now, he was in a sorry state and was covered in soot. But now that his body had recovered, his fair and tender skin was not bad, but now that his flesh was exposed, it was a different story. Jun Dashao rejoiced in his heart. When he first saw this old man, he had the demeanor of an immortal and had a graceful bearing. He really had the supreme elegance of an otherworldly expert. But now, he was in such a sorry state. Thinking quickly, he took out an outer robe and handed it over. Gu Han took it subconsciously and suddenly realized something. His face turned red and he hurriedly put on the robe. His injuries had recovered, but his appearance was very unsightly. It was no different from Jean Luan Hui's appearance. Although it was an emergency and a man should not be bothered by trifles, there were women present. It was not that the people of Heaven Saint Palace did not think of this, but they were unable to carry a world with them like Jun Dashao, and could take out clothes at any time. If they wanted to give clothes, they could only give out their own clothes, and they were also riddled with holes. Zhan Kuang. The main culprit behind this disaster is Zhan Kuang. Gu Han suddenly spat out a breath of air, gritting his teeth as he said, Zhan Kuang is the ancestor of the Zhan clan of the 8 great clans of the Misty Mansion. At the same time, he is also one of the 8 great disciples of the first-generation master of the Misty Mansion, Miao Qingqing. He is the only one left alive. Jun Moxie nodded and said, Yes, what is the source? Gu Han snorted, his face twitching. Everything started from greed. In these 10,000 years, ever since the Misty Mansion was established, it has been inextricably linked to the 3 Holy Lands. Back then, when the first young master sealed the Pillar of Heaven's mountains and divided the continent into 2 regions, in order to support the seal, he set up a 9 illusory quicksand nirvana formation in the ancestral hall of the 3 Holy Lands, absorbing the heaven and earth Ling Qi to form the 9 illusory quicksand. Then, the 9 illusory quicksand was used to maintain the natural operation of the formation, continuously producing the energy needed to seal the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. This was to ensure that the strange races would never be able to easily step into the Xian continent. 9 illusory quicksand. Nirvana formation. Jun Moxie muttered. So that's how it is. And the reason why the Misty Mansion was able to be formed was because of the 9 illusory divine pearls passed down by the first young master. That was also a mysterious heaven and earth formation, moving heaven and earth into a mustard seed, moving the sun and moon into a small space. That was how the Misty Mansion was formed. But if the Misty Mansion wanted to continue existing, every 1,000 years, a certain amount of 9 illusory quicksand had to be poured into the eye of the formation. Once it was interrupted, it meant that the entire realm of the Misty Mansion would collapse. Gu Han let out a deep sigh. And today's calamity is because of this. Jun Moxie was completely enlightened. If the eye of the formation in the Misty Mansion was not able to receive the supply of 9 illusory quicksand, the source of life of the Misty Mansion, the Rainbow Holy Tree, would wither and die in a short period of time. If the Rainbow Holy Tree died, the entire Misty Mansion, along with all the life within, would also turn into dust. Gu Han said solemnly. Back then, the Nine Nether First Young Master was also worried that the three Holy Lands would have evil intentions, and purposely destroyed the Misty Mansion. So although this 9 illusory quicksand nirvana formation was set up within the boundaries of the Holy Lands because of the seal of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains, the necessary maintenance and operation of this formation must be handled by the people of the Misty Mansion. He raised his head to look at June Moxie, knowing that he did not understand. Back then, the 9 Nether First Young Master had passed down a set of special Xian skills, but he changed it later on, and finally gave one set to each of his 4 disciples. But the effects of the Xian skills that they received were different. Among them, only the divine skill passed down by Senior Miao Qing of the Misty Mansion can truly activate the 9 illusory quicksand nirvana formation, and only those with the cultivation of a saint venerable and above can activate it. June Moxie nodded his head silently. This was the best way to cooperate and rely on each other. And this 9 illusory quicksand nirvana formation, other than having the effect of maintaining the seal of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains, is also extremely powerful. Experts below the saint venerable level are completely unable to enter. Even if it's a saint venerable, once they enter, no matter how powerful their Xian skills are, the moment they enter, not even 1 in 1,000 will remain. It's equivalent to an ordinary person. And with the strength of an ordinary person, the amount of 9 illusory quicksand that they can bring out each time is just enough for 1,000 years. Maybe a little more, but definitely not much more. June Moxie took in a deep breath. He suddenly felt a heartfelt respect for the 9 Nether First Young Master. This arrogant number 1 madman since the beginning of time was extremely thoughtful for his disciples and disciples. Such a plan was undoubtedly close to perfection. Not only did it suppress the evil intentions of the 3 Holy Lands, but it also cut off the possibility of the Misty Mansion's plan of remaining independent. Thus, they could coexist in peace for a long time. No wonder the 3 Holy Lands could stand for 10,000 years without collapsing. So the real reason for all this was because of this 9 illusory quicksand nirvana formation. The Misty Mansion would specially come over to retrieve it every 1,000 years to ensure the smooth operation of the 9 illusory quicksand formation. At the same time, the Misty Mansion's own operation of the 9 illusory quicksand had never changed in these 10,000 years, and there had never been any accidents. And because of this layer of interdependence, the 3 Holy Lands had reached a tacit understanding with the Misty Mansion. Every time the Misty Mansion came, they would bring 2 sets of 7 colored holy fruits, and the Holy Lands would gift them 2 stalks of exquisite lotus. You can say it's an exchange, or you can say it's reciprocity. 10,000 years passed just like that. Just a few days ago, that Zhan Luanhui, the reincarnation of Zhan Kuang, suddenly came to Mount Heaven Saint to seek an audience with this old man. He said that the war for seizing the heavens is just around the corner, and he was afraid that it would disturb the Holy Land's preparations for the war for seizing the heavens, so he specially came here to maintain the formation. At the same time, he also took back this 1,000-year 9 illusory quicksand. June Moxie raised his eyebrows, a questioning look on his face. Gu Han smiled bitterly. You don't have to doubt it. The deadline of 1,000 years has yet to arrive. Zhan Luanhui's arrival was indeed sudden. However, ever since the collapse of the Pillar of Sky Mountains 8,000 years ago, it had a huge impact on the 9 illusory quicksand nirvana formation. In recent years, the seal of the Pillar of Sky Mountains would show signs of loosening from time to time. Now that the war for seizing the heavens is just around the corner, and the strength of our 3 Holy Lands is currently too weak, so we don't have the confidence to win. In fact, we might even be completely annihilated in this battle. Zhan Luanhui's arrival at this time also gave us a thought. That is, even if we all die in this battle, this 9 illusory quicksand nirvana formation can still be sustained for at least another 1,000 years. Even if the strange races can invade the Xian continent, only the most powerful experts can enter the Xian continent. At the same time, we also believe that the Misty Mansion would not sit by and watch their lifeline fall into the hands of outsiders. For a long period of time, even if the 3 Holy Lands are on the decline, the Misty Mansion will still take the initiative to defend this place. So after some discussion, we agreed to Jean Luen Hui's request. At that time, we still did not know that he was the Zhan Kuang of the past. Although he also revealed the strength of a 4th-level Saint Venerable, we did not take it to heart. Gu Han smiled bitterly. Our strength may not be considered extremely high, but we are still more than enough to deal with a 4th-level Saint Venerable. Even if he really wanted to play tricks, we would be able to stop him in time. But who could have expected? Gu Han's face flushed red and he coughed violently. Who could have expected that this Jean Luen Hui was actually the ancestor of the Misty Mansion's Zhan family, Zhan Kuang? Zhan Kuang was deranged. Relying on the fact that his strength had long surpassed that of a Saint Venerable, Saint Monarch, and was almost at the level of a saint, the 9 illusory quicksand nirvana formation had a negligible effect on him. He actually forcefully collected a large amount of 9 illusory quicksand in the 9 illusory quicksand nirvana formation. The accumulation of 10,000 years. He actually took away all of it in one go. Not a single bit was left. When he said this, everyone from Heaven's Saint Palace clenched their fists tightly, their faces filled with grief and indignation. Gu Han paused for a moment, his gaze turning solid. The 9 illusory quicksand that Zhan Kuang took away was enough to supply the Misty Mansion for at least 1,000,000 years. Zhan Kuang is truly the disciple that 4th Master Miao is most proud of. He is indeed farsighted. This move is truly a one-off. But after he took away all of the 9 illusory quicksand, the Nirvana formation could no longer operate. There was no way to gather enough 9 illusory quicksand to operate the 9 illusory quicksand Nirvana formation in a day or two. Gu Han smiled bitterly. Without the 9 illusory quicksand, how can it still be called the 9 illusory quicksand Nirvana formation? Just as Zhan Kuang came out, the pillar of Heaven's mountains suddenly showed signs of collapsing. This old man knew that something was wrong and asked Zhan Kuang, "What did you do in there?" Gu Han's face twitched. At that time, Zhan Kuang explained that after the reinforcement of the formation, the seal of the pillar of Heaven's mountains would be even stronger than before. Chapter 11:28. I vaguely felt that something was amiss, but I didn't know exactly what it was. But that 9 illusory quicksand formation, due to the limitations of our cultivation techniques, requires us to expend a large amount of energy every time we enter. In order to ascertain the situation, I couldn't care less. Seeing the rocks falling from the pillar of Heaven's mountains, I rushed in to investigate. Only then did I realize that the 9 illusory quicksand formation no longer had any 9 illusory quicksand. The formation had completely stopped operating. Once the formation stops operating, it means that the seal on the pillar of Heaven's mountains is no longer there. Gu Han's eyes turned red as he spoke up to this point, almost tearing up. As an old man who had lived for countless years, to be able to show such emotions, it was clear that his heart was extremely agitated. This was undoubtedly the collapse of a lifetime's worth of beliefs. Jun Moxie sighed in his heart. No wonder Gu Han's performance in this battle was so poor. It seemed like he was not as strong as the last time he was here. So that was the case. He had already expended too much energy in the 9 illusory quicksand formation. This old man immediately came out and asked Zhan Kuang, "Where did the 9 illusory quicksand go?" Gu Han's eyes turned ferocious. And at that time, Zhan Kuang was actually still on Mount Heaven Saint, searching for spirit herbs everywhere. This person's insatiable greed really makes one's hair stand on end. Jun Moxie was also speechless. You did such a terrible thing, yet you still didn't forget to take advantage of others. Isn't this a little too conceited? How would he know that it wasn't that Zhan Kuang didn't want to leave? In fact, he wanted to leave more than anyone else. But at that time, he just had to discover the immortal soul grass on Mount Heaven Saint. Because his soul was stronger than his body, he couldn't completely fuse with it. And this immortal soul grass was a treasure that could get rid of this fundamental problem. As long as he could continuously consume the immortal soul grass for a month, twice a day, 3 stalks each time. That way, he would be able to truly recover Zhan Kuang's peak battle strength without any negative side effect. So Zhan Kuang was also very helpless at that time. Originally, he could just say goodbye and disappear without a trace. No one would be able to find him, and even if they did, they wouldn't be able to do anything to him. But he stopped because of the immortal soul grass. Zhan Kuang was also clear that the Pillar of Heaven's mountains was about to collapse. The 3 Holy Lands and the Heaven Saint Palace were on the brink of destruction. Once they fell, all the immortal soul grass would be gone. If he missed this opportunity, he didn't know when he would be able to recover his strength. Hence, Zhan Kuang was also extremely depressed. This was a tough decision to make. Just as he was frantically collecting the immortal soul grass, Gu Han suddenly appeared to question him. Zhan Kuang was naturally unwilling to take out the 9 illusory quicksand that he had already obtained. As a result, the 2 sides could not see eye to eye and a fight was about to break out. Right at this moment, the Pillar of Heaven's mountains suddenly collapsed. Gu Han was naturally enraged and was on the verge of going crazy. Because of Gu Han's obstruction, Zhan Kuang was only able to collect half of the required amount of immortal soul grass. He was also enraged. The experts of the Heaven Saint Palace entered the battlefield one after another, fighting intensely at the foot of the collapsed Pillar of Heaven's mountains. But as the fight went on, the volcano suddenly erupted. Blessings never come in pairs, but misfortunes never come singly. Both sides were peak experts of the world. They fought as they retreated, chasing all the way. The experts of the 3 Holy Lands fought with their lives to make Zhan Luanhui stay and snatch back the 9 illusory quicksand. Zhan Luanhui did not even put them in his eyes from the start. Besides, he was also afraid that some of these experts would self-destruct just to target him. Then with his current body, no matter how strong he was, he would still be injured. So he fought all the way, not daring to completely extinguish the hope in the hearts of the Heaven Saint Palace people. And with new volcanoes erupting all around, no expert could ignore this kind of power of nature. Just as Zhan Luanhui felt that he could take the opportunity to escape far away, and not have to worry about the threat of self-destruction, Jun Dashao suddenly appeared, and gave the most shocking gift the moment he appeared. This surprise played out from the beginning to the end. From this point, it could be said that both sides were extremely unlucky. I still don't understand why Zhan Luanhui would be so ruthless this time, taking away all the 9 illusory quicksand in one go. Every time the Misty Mansion came to retrieve the 9 illusory quicksand, the people from the Holy Lands had never stopped them, nor made things difficult for them. Every time someone came, it was a distinguished guest of the Heaven Saint Palace. Could it be that 1,000 years of peace is too short? They can just come and take it when the time comes. Why must they do this? An old man stroked his beard and asked in confusion. This problem is very simple. Because Zhan Luanhui wants the Zhan family to monopolize the Misty Mansion. If the 9 illusory quicksand is left, the Zhan family will not be able to form a monopoly. This is directly cutting off the Miao family's hope. As long as the 9 illusory quicksand is in his hands, then as long as the Miao family and the other families in the Misty Mansion want the Misty Mansion to continue operating, then they must bow down to the Zhan family. June Moxie said lightly. What Jean Luen Hui wants is only the misty mansion. Nothing else. But once the 9 illusory quicksand is gone, the Nirvana formation will not be able to continue operating. With the collapse of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains, the strange races will be able to enter, and the people of the Xian continent will suffer. Zhan Kuang is also an expert of his generation, and few can compare to him in terms of seniority. Could it be that in his eyes, the lives of all the people in the world are not comparable to the position of the ruler of the Misty Mansion? That old man said angrily. This bastard is simply inhumane. Precisely because Zhan Kuang is an expert of his generation, a peerless expert. So in his eyes, the people of the world are just a bunch of ants. And why would he care about the lives of a bunch of ants? The safety of the continent is just a fart in Zhan Kuang's eyes. Or even less than a fart. Gu Han roared angrily. June Moxie finally understood the cause and effect of this matter, but he couldn't help but sigh. Just for this 9 illusory quicksand, Jean Luen Hui exposed the entire continent to the wolves of the strange races. He's worse than a beast. This kind of behavior is no different from a traitor who betrayed his country. Then, June Moxie thought of another question. You said that Jean Luen Hui took away the 9 illusory quicksand, but we all saw the battle just now. Jean Luen Hui was practically naked, and he even fell into the mouth of the volcano. But from start to end, we didn't see even the shadow of the 9 illusory quicksand? The 9 illusory quicksand that is enough to last for 1,000,000 years should not be a small amount, right? Gu Han smiled bitterly. This is the amazing thing about the 9 illusory quicksand. Before it's collected, the 9 illusory quicksand is just a single grain of transparent sand. There's a world inside, and it's extremely heavy. 1 grain of sand weighs several jin. But once it's taken out, it will become weightless and exist in the soul. If this person doesn't die, then other than himself, no one else will be able to take out the 9 illusory quicksand. I see. June Moxie nodded silently. From the looks of it, Jean Luen Hui is not dead. The 9 illusory quicksand is still in his hands. This matter is a little troublesome. Jean Luen Hui is not dead? Although everyone had seen Jean Luen Hui leap out of the volcano, they still held on to a sliver of hope. He had already been burned to that state by the lava. How could he still be alive? This was also a human's instinct to think on the bright side. And Jean Luen Hui was still alive. The disadvantages of this matter were far beyond everyone's expectations. His body is dead, but his soul has not. June Moxie nodded lightly. Then isn't it even more troublesome? Everyone was an expert and naturally understood the twists and turns in this matter. Jean Luen Hui had turned from a tangible form to a formless form. Do you really think this daddy is a god? June Moxie was really anxious now. Do you guys think this daddy is an idiot? Chapter 11:29. Everyone was speechless. Looking around, there were only a few dozen people. This was the strongest battle force in the world, and the main force against the strange races. Just a small handful. June Moxie was going crazy. Pulling on his hair, he said, Come, big shots, please teach me, HM? Please, teach me. How do we fight this battle? Fight with what? F*CK. Even if we can kill one with a single breath, we will all die from exhaustion. Millions. My God, millions. This daddy is too awesome. Too awesome. 1 person against millions. Oh my God, this daddy is really a hero. Fully deserving of being an idol. Mother****, why didn't I realize that I was so noble, so great, and so powerful? Gu Han and the rest were speechless. This was the truth. What else could they do? Millions ah. June Moxie suddenly smiled bitterly. I've heard you talk about the war for seizing the heavens before. I always thought that both sides would pull out a group of people, and have a duel of swords on Mount Hua. Everyone would go their separate ways and go back to their own homes to find their own mothers. But in my mind, in a battle like this, at most, the two sides will choose a few representatives, no more than 20 or 30 people, to fight. Only now do I know that we will suddenly have to face millions. Jun Moxie said with a conflicted expression. This is a little too different from what I imagined. Gu Han also laughed bitterly. Who told you that both sides will only send out a few dozen people? The reason why the war for seizing the heavens is called the war for seizing the heavens is because of the scale and the cruelty of the battle. It is something that no one can imagine. There are at least a few thousand people on both sides, and all of them are top experts. Furthermore, in order to be safe, both sides will put in a lot of effort to nurture their own talent. They will bring their own disciples and grand disciples with potential to let them witness the war for seizing the heavens. So, every war for seizing the heavens, there will be at least tens of thousands of people on both sides. How is this a small battle between 20 to 30 people? Jun Moxie looked at the sky speechlessly. His expression was very melancholic. Besides, what's the sword duel at Mount Hua? Gu Han stroked his beard and asked suspiciously. The sword meet on Mount Hua, it's where a few experts come together to fight for the title of the world's #1 swordsman. Mount Hua is a very beautiful place. And that's it. Jun Moxie sighed sorrowfully. Let's not talk about the sword meet on Mount Hua. Let's talk about the war for seizing the heavens. Mei Xuyan sighed and said faintly, What's there to talk about? We're just doing our best to fight. As long as we have a clear conscience, it's fine. The faces of those from the Heaven Saint Palace were filled with shame at the same time. Of course, they knew about the 3 Holy Lands dealing with the Tianfa forest, but they had never stopped it. This was undoubtedly connivance. That was why the 3 Holy Lands were getting more and more brazen and overboard. But now, the 3 Holy Lands were already crippled, and the strange races were invading. They still had to rely on the Tianfa forest to withstand this crisis. What kind of feeling is this? Gu Han and the rest did not know. But the unbearable shame and guilt in their hearts caused these old seniors' faces to turn red and white, unable to say a word. We're just doing our best to fight. As long as we have a clear conscience, it's fine. These were Mei Xuyan's words. But how could they say that they had a clear conscience? After thinking for a long time, Gu Han finally sighed and said, Venerable Mei, the 3 Holy Lands have let you down. After saying that, he could not help but feel a sour feeling in his heart. How was it just letting them down? If the 3 Holy Lands did not deal with Mei Xuyan and the Tianfa forest, how would they have offended Jun Moxie? Under their relentless pressure, they had finally offended Jun Moxie, this super fiend. The 3 Holy Lands had practically been destroyed by this kid. And there was one thing that Gu Han did not know. If they did not deal with Mei Xuyan, if they did not offend Jun Moxie's growth might not have been this fast. It could be said that Jun Moxie's current advancement was practically hastened step by step under the immense pressure of the 3 Holy Lands. Every time the 3 Holy Lands attacked, it allowed Jun Moxie's cultivation to advance by leaps and bounds. If Jun Moxie did not advance so quickly, then he naturally would not have set his sights on the exquisite lotus and the 7-colored holy fruit. Then he would not have entered the Misty Mansion. As long as Jun Moxie did not enter the Misty Mansion, the Zhan family's scheme might not have failed. They might have successfully reversed the Miao family's fortune and monopolized the Misty Mansion. In that case, Zhan Luanhui would not have set his sights on the 9 illusory quicksand, and the 3 Holy Lands would not be destroyed. From this angle, one could actually come to a conclusion. Because the 3 Holy Lands dealt with Mei Xuyan, the 3 Holy Lands were destroyed. This sounded ridiculous, but the truth was as such. There's no need to mention the past. Mei Xuyan smiled lightly. But after this battle, if we all die in battle, then everything will be over. But if we can survive, then the 3 Holy Lands must give me an explanation. Of course, Gu Han said solemnly. Then he sighed. After this battle, if we are defeated, even if we can survive, this old man will not have the face to continue living in this world. The possibility of our victory in this battle. He laughed bitterly and shook his head. I'm afraid this old man will have to bear the infamy of being the greatest sinner in history. Not necessarily, Mei Shuyan said calmly. We may not lose this battle. Ah? Why does Venerable Mei say that? Gu Han thought that Mei Shuyan had some good idea, and his eyes lit up as he asked in surprise. The hope on his face was clear in his words. The others also looked at Mei Shuyan with sparkling eyes, waiting for her to speak, hoping that she would say something that could turn the tide of the battle. Because this time, Mo Xie is participating in the battle, Mei Shuyan said proudly. At the same time, the way she looked at Jun Moxie was filled with trust and happiness. In this world, if there was one person who had the most confidence in Jun Moxie, then that person would definitely be Mei Shuyan. Mei Shuyan was the only one who knew Jun Moxie's secret. Although Snake King and Qian Sun had entered the Hongjun Pagoda before, they only knew about this mysterious space. But Mei Shuyan was someone who had cultivated the art of unlocking heaven's fortune. She knew how miraculous this cultivation technique was. It could practically steal the fortune of heaven and earth, and all the miraculous powers in the world could not compare to the art of unlocking heaven's fortune. Mei Shuyan had yet to cultivate to the 3rd level, but she already possessed 10 times the strength she had before. And according to Jun Moxie, there were a total of 9 levels to the art of unlocking heaven's fortune. The power of each level was dozens of times stronger than the one below it. Then, Mei Shuyan could not imagine what it would be like if she really cultivated to the 9th level. Mei Shuyan had seen Jun Mo Xie with her own eyes, as if he was performing a magic trick, refining spirit pills one by one, batch by batch. Right now, he even had a large number of spirit pills in his hands. Especially that heaven reversal pill that could instantly heal injuries. It was even more heaven-defying. Including Saint Venerables, no matter what injuries they suffered, as long as they consumed the heaven reversal pill, they would be able to recover completely. Currently, everyone from Tian Fa and the evil Monarch Manor who had set off for battle had one each. It was not hard to imagine that if 2 people with the same cultivation base fought fiercely with the intention to perish together, and both of them were heavily injured and on the verge of death. But at this time, one of them took out a reversal pill, consumed it, and recovered all of his battle strength. What would the result be? So Mei Shuyan felt that although the other party had the advantage in numbers, it was impossible for all of them to be experts. But on her side, every single one of them was an elite soldier, and every single one of them had 2 lives. That was incredible. This battle might not necessarily be so pessimistic. At most, it would just drag on for a longer period of time. With Jun Moxie around, victory would belong to the continent sooner or later. This was what Mei Shuyan thought in her heart. She had always believed in this. Jun Moxie? He alone has the ability to turn the entire situation around? Gu Han turned to look at Jun Moxie in disappointment and sighed. Jun Moxie smiled lightly and said, "Time is of the essence, we need to make the best use of it. Let's not talk about anything else." Then with a flip of his hand, 2 small jade bottles appeared. "These are the heaven reversal pills that I've specially refined. No matter how serious your injuries are, as long as you consume it, you will recover instantly. I see that almost all of you are injured, so you should consume one first." He paused for a moment and said, "There are a total of 100 heaven reversal pills in these 2 jade bottles. As for the rest, each of you can carry one with you. In case of emergencies, 1 pill can completely recover any injuries? Recover all of your strength?" Gu Han took the jade bottle and looked at it suspiciously. His expression was filled with obvious distrust. Even if he was beaten to death, he wouldn't believe that there was such a miraculous thing in this world. Whether it's useful or not, you'll know once you use it. June Moxie rolled his eyes and said sarcastically, "This old fellow actually dares to doubt this young master's things? Do you know how much effort this young master spent to obtain this heaven reversal pill? If not for the war for seizing the heavens, how would you have the chance to taste this young master's miraculous medicine?" Gu Han narrowed his eyes and opened the jade bottle dubiously. Instantly, he smelled a fragrant aroma wafting out. He carefully poured out a pill and placed it in his mouth. Just as he was about to chew and swallow it, he discovered that the pill melted in his mouth, turning into a warm current that instantly surged into his limbs and bones. An extremely comfortable feeling rose from every part of his body, and he almost couldn't help but moan. Numbness and itchiness quickly rose from all the injured parts of his body, and then the xian qi in his meridians suddenly flowed like a river bursting through a dam. When this intoxicating feeling disappeared, Gu Han circulated his xian qi and was pleasantly surprised to discover that all of his injuries were completely healed. Fighting with Zhan Lunhui, Gu Han's internal organs were all damaged, and because he had entered the 9 illusory quicksand nirvana formation, his cultivation had not recovered. But it was this small pill that not only healed all of his injuries in a single breath's time, his strength had also recovered to its peak. Even with Gu Han's mental fortitude, his hands that were holding onto the 2 jade bottles actually started to tremble, to the point that he almost couldn't hold onto the jade bottles anymore. The expression on his face was one of wild joy. He raised his head abruptly and looked at June Moxie. Taking a step forward, he asked in a trembling voice, "June Moxie, how many of these pills do you have?" Chapter 1130. How many do you have? How many of such pills does old Gu think this lord should have? June Moxie glared at Gu Han and sneered. Gu Han was immediately at a loss for words. Just now, he had completely looked down on such a small pill, but he had never thought that the effects of such a pill would be so shocking. With such a pill on him, wasn't it the same as having an extra life? But on the other hand, for such a miraculous pill to have such shocking effects, the ingredients needed to concoct it would definitely be rare, and the quantity would definitely not be too much. For June Moxie to be able to give out more than 100 pills in one go, allowing everyone here to have 1 pill each and even make them richer, it was already a huge favor. And, Manor Lord June, please forgive this old man for being shameless. May I ask how many more of such pills do Manor Lord have in your hands? Just now, this old man's eyes were not good, and I was unable to see the preciousness of this pill. For such a miraculous pill, if there is a certain scale of reserves, it might really be able to deal with the great danger before us. Gu Han said awkwardly. How could he not know that this heaven reversal pill was June Moxie's unique pill, and it would definitely be extremely precious? But such a miraculous pill could practically decide the final outcome of this unprecedentedly dangerous battle. Even though he knew that his words were presumptuous, he still braced himself and said it. Perhaps it was just as Mei Shuiyan had said. Although the situation before them was dangerous, but because of June Moxie's forceful intervention, everything was possible. It was only now that Gu Han started to believe this sentence a little. The great battle is imminent. This lord will not hide anything from you anymore. This lord still has this kind of pill, and it's not a small amount. June Moxie said indifferently. Gu Han was overjoyed when he heard that. Just as he was about to speak again, he heard June Moxie continue. However, the quantity of this heaven reversal pill is this lord's matter, and there is no need for old Gu to worry about it. After all, there are too few people who are worthy of using it. At the very least, you don't have the qualifications to use more reversal pills. The 100 pills you obtained are already not bad. Gu Han instantly fell silent. He was also an old man who had lived for thousands of years. How could he not know that with what the three Holy Lands had done to June Moxie and Mei Shuyan, not to mention being gifted with such a miraculous pill, the fact that the evil Monarch Manor and Tian Fa evil lands did not kick them when they were down and wipe them out in one go was already very considerate of the bigger picture. But at this moment, a great battle was imminent. Seeing this miraculous pill that was equivalent to another life in front of them, how could they not be tempted? Right now, regardless of whether it was the Heaven Saint Palace or the three Holy Lands, their strength was already at an extremely low point. Having a few more of these heaven-reversing pills was equivalent to giving the three Holy Lands a bit more hope. It also added a sliver of hope to this extremely dangerous situation. After thinking for a while, Gu Han finally said bitterly, "Manor Lord June, the past is already in the past. The enemy before them was a critical moment of life and death. Both sides must join hands against the enemy and work together sincerely. Only then will there be a sliver of hope." This old man had already said earlier this old man thinks that this pill that Manor Lord June is giving can be said to be the key to victory. I hope that Manor Lord June will not hold grudges against us, and give us more. With Gu Han's status, for him to say such words at this moment was already equivalent to begging bitterly. If it was just for himself, even if Gu Han died 10,000 times, he would definitely not lower his face to beg others like this. But right now, he was carrying the hopes of the world and the three Holy Lands on his back. Although he was aggrieved, and even knew that the hope was not great, he still had to lower his face. After all, compared to the safety of the continent and the inheritance of the Holy Lands, personal honor and humiliation were already negligible. June Moxie looked deeply at Gu Han for a while and finally said, "Fine. The people from the three Holy Lands are indeed not worth this pill. But you, old Gu, and your words earlier, are indeed worthy of this pill." With a flick of his wrist, Jun Dashao took out another 3 bottles of pills and said, "Might as well give you another 150 heaven reversal pills. This is really the limit." Jun Moxie paused for a while and said, "Old Gu, you are also an understanding person. This monarch can say with certainty that apart from this monarch, looking at the world today, how many of these pills can there be? Old Gu also said just now that the battlefield is dangerous. Everyone must cooperate sincerely. As long as you are willing to give your all, if we meet with danger in the war for seizing the heavens, do you think this monarch will really stand by and do nothing?" After giving a carrot, he naturally had to beat them with a stick. Don't think that this young master's good pills are so easily obtained. If you don't put in the effort after giving me the pills, then you're just asking for trouble. Of course, as long as you put in the effort, there would still be a lot of pills. After beating them with a stick, he painted a picture. Jun Dashao's control was still very good. Gu Han was overjoyed when he heard this. Compared to the population of the three Holy Lands, 150 pills was indeed not a lot. But he also understood Jun Moxie's words. Such miraculous pills, even if there were, how many of them could there be? Even if they were rich, they had to give it to their own people first. The 250 heaven reversal pills that he had obtained was already not a small amount. If he were to judge based on the value of these pills, it would definitely be an astronomical figure, and it was an astronomical figure that even someone of Gu Han's status had to be fearful of. Not to mention the fact that the foundations of the three Holy Lands were almost completely destroyed. Even if it wasn't completely destroyed, taking out the corresponding value would not only cause them to go bankrupt, it would also greatly damage their vitality. If he continued to insist, then he would be making things difficult for them. Besides, Jun Moxie had also emphasized that as long as there were no more spies from the three Holy Lands, if there were any injured people from the three Holy Lands during the battle, he would definitely not stand by and watch. This was already very enough. First, he gave him 100 pills, then another 150 pills. a total of 250 pills. In his joy, Gu Han completely ignored this rather unpleasant number. This old man had just swallowed one pill, so there's still 249 left. No matter what, it shouldn't be 250, right? In this battle, I believe that no matter if it's the three Holy Lands or us, we all need to do our best. We even need to be prepared to die at any time. Only then will we have a slight chance of victory. If we don't have such mental preparations, everything will be for naught. Even if we have the best equipment, it will be of no use. Jun Moxie looked at Gu Han deeply and said, "Old Gu, previously, both sides had different standpoints. There's something that I didn't want to say, but after thinking about it, seeing that you're wholeheartedly working for the world, I still have to remind you. As for whether these words are acceptable to you, it's up to old Gu to decide." Gu Han's heart skipped a beat, and he felt an inexplicable chill. Right now, time was tight, and every minute and second was extremely precious. But Jun Moxie had to specially remind himself at such a delicate time. Then it was easy to imagine how important this sentence was. Thinking about this, Gu Han's face also turned solemn. "Manor Lord Jun, please speak your mind. This old man is confident that I can still hold on with my willpower. This battle is exceptionally dangerous. Accidents were bound to happen at every moment. Even if it's a Saint Monarch or Saint Venerable, it's hard to guarantee that they won't perish in the battle." Jun Moxie said lightly. "So, this will be a long and drawn-out battle." "That's right." Manor Lord Jun's words make a lot of sense. Although he didn't know what Jun Moxie meant, Gu Han still instinctively agreed. "So, don't be afraid of wolf-like enemies, but be afraid of pig-like companions." Two rays of cold light suddenly shot out from Jun Moxie's eyes. "Don't be afraid of the enemy's cruelty, but be afraid of the black knife and betrayal from behind." Gu Han's entire body turned cold. He already knew what Jun Moxie was going to say. "I believe old Gu already understands what I want to say, but I still want to make it clear here and now. The three Holy Lands and Tian Fa Forest have a long history of enmity. To the leaders of the Holy Lands, including Mo Wudao, I believe that as long as the outcome of this battle is not clear, no one will play any trick. But to the people from the three Holy Lands, I don't believe that." Jun Moxie said lightly. "Old Gu, you should understand the logic of a 1,000-mile dike collapsing because of an ant's nest. So, as long as one person from the three Holy Lands dares to hold us back and betray us, I will not hesitate to exterminate the three Holy Lands. From the root. I will no longer care about any motives, reasons, or standpoint. This is the result. This is just a reminder, a kind reminder. If it doesn't happen, that's naturally for the best. But if it does happen, don't blame me for not warning you," Jun Moxie said with a smile. "I originally wanted to let it go and wait for it to happen before taking action. But after seeing you guys today, I changed my mind." Gu Han gritted his teeth and nodded heavily. This old man understands. Right now, the entire Xian continent is in a precarious situation, and we need to work together to tide through this crisis. If there's someone from the three Holy Lands who is so despicable and shameless, then there's no need for the three Holy Lands to exist even without you taking action. I hope old Gu's words are sincere." A trace of mockery flashed past Jun Moxie's eyes before he regained his indifference. What he had said was not because he was preparing for a rainy day, nor was it because he was making baseless conjectures. Instead, it was because he had lived two lives, and it was because he had a profound understanding of human nature. If the battle had not ended, or if the continent had not gained the upper hand, the three Holy Lands would definitely not deal with Tian Fa. But if the outcome of the battle was already decided, and the strange races had already lost their momentum, the three Holy Lands would definitely play some trick. This was not gauging the heart of a gentleman with one's own yardstick. This was the deep-rooted bad nature of humans. Suppressing Tian-Fa for tens of thousands of years was precisely because of this despicable nature of humans. Especially in the current situation, where the foundations of the three Holy Lands were mostly gone. They would definitely not believe that the evil monarch Manor and Tian-Fa would not make use of this opportunity to eradicate the three Holy Lands and dominate the Xian continent. Chapter 1131. Because Gu Han had already deeply experienced Jun Moxi's unfathomable strength. Rashly going against such an unfathomable existence would only lead to one's own destruction. However, there were simply too few people who understood this point. Jun Moxi narrowed his eyes and straightened his body, looking at the volcanic fireworks in the distance. He said slowly, "Now it's time for us to take action. Next, we'll split into a few groups and head out to investigate. People from the three Holy Lands, you guys can form your own group. As for the communication between us, we'll do this and that." As he said that, Jun Moxi began to draw a simple map on the ground according to the surrounding terrain. Then, he proposed a general battle plan and a way for both parties to communicate. Gu Han and the rest listened attentively, nodding their heads repeatedly. Jun Moxi's tone was calm and natural, but it was filled with extreme confidence. He waved his hands casually, giving out orders and giving orders. Everything was so natural. Unknowingly, due to fate, the higher-ups of the three Holy Lands and one Ferocious Lands had already tacitly approved of Jun Moxi's leadership position in this battle. "All right, that's decided for now. Let's split up." Jun Moxi stood up and threw the stone in his hand away. His eyes shone with a blood-red killing intent. "It's fine if the strange races don't come. But if they do, this battle will not let a single one of them go. Those who have the guts to enter the Xian continent must bear the consequences of failure and death. Go!" Following the order, the dozens of experts from the Heaven Saint Palace exploded soundlessly, flying off in different directions. "What should we do now?" Mei Shuyan asked. "We should first find the whereabouts of the Eagle King and Bear King." Jun Moxi furrowed his brows. Under such a violent volcanic eruption, the strange races should not be able to come over temporarily. But in my heart, I don't know why, but I keep feeling uneasy. Could it be that there are other variables within this? The two of them glanced at each other and stood up at the same time. With a swoosh, two white shadows streaked across the sky and disappeared in the blink of an eye. At the same time, on the other side of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains, the Eagle Bear Coalition army had also encountered an unprecedented crisis. At this moment, the originally majestic Pillar of Heaven's mountains had completely collapsed into a pile of rubble. The earth was still shaking violently because of this sudden change. Flames filled the air and smoke filled the air. 30 to 40 volcanoes erupted at the same time, and their power shook the heavens and the earth, as if they were going to tear the entire sky apart. Not to mention humans, even metal and stone would not be able to pass through this barrier of death safely. However, nothing was absolute in this world. There were always accidents. The eruption of a volcano was undoubtedly cruel, and the area it covered was extremely vast. However, the Pillar of Heaven's mountains stretched for tens of thousands of miles, and there was bound to be a part of it that was not covered by the power of the volcanic eruption. Due to the disaster, the local temperature in these places had risen to an astonishing height of several hundred degrees Celsius. The temperature was high enough to melt gold and rock. But, to experts above the level of the Holy Emperor, this kind of temperature was still bearable. And most importantly, the strange races had always been blocked by the Pillar of Heaven's mountains on the other side of the Xian continent. Their desire to occupy this continent was also extremely urgent. This natural barrier was completely gone in an instant. They immediately chose a place where they could enter and exit, and forcefully broke out. As for the Eagle Bear Coalition army, they flew all the way to the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. When they saw this huge scene, they were naturally extremely shocked. At the same time, they understood that the situation before them was extremely dangerous. They did not dare to be negligent. On one hand, they carefully avoided the erupting volcanoes, avoiding the natural dangers. On the other hand, they carefully searched for traces of the enemy. Almost at the first moment, they discovered the large number of strange races surging over. Without any hesitation, the Eagle Bear Coalition army gave the order to intercept. In the sky and on the ground, the two troops discovered each other at the same time. It was as if lightning had ignited the fire of the earth. Like a pair of adulterers and lovers, both sides hit it off immediately. At the same time, they struck the most flirtatious pose, and with the most intense passion, they began what they believed to be the most intense battle of their lives. Almost at the start of the battle, the Eagle Bear Coalition army was already complaining incessantly. The battle against the strange races this time was unexpectedly difficult. June Moxie had never truly been to the area south of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. Everything he knew about the strange races had always come from rumors, so he did not know how difficult the living conditions there were. South of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains, there were only 2 seasons in a year, winter and summer. During winter, the weather was extremely cold, and the temperature could reach -40 to 50 degrees Celsius. If the temperature was at its lowest, it could even reach -70 to 80 degrees Celsius. But during summer, when the temperature was higher, it was as if they were burning in a raging fire to be able to survive in such a harsh climate. The strange races were basically people with strong bodies. In addition, almost all of the strange races needed to cultivate. The reason was very simple. In such a harsh environment, not cultivating was equivalent to giving up the chance to survive. But on the other hand, with the mentality of cultivating in order to survive, they naturally worked even harder than the other. Each one was stronger than the other. And there was another point. The strange races were all conjoined twins, which meant that there were 2 sets of meridians in one person's body. And it was the yin and yang complementing each other. Imperceptibly, there was a natural advantage. The physique that the people of Xian continent looked down upon had great benefit. This kind of complementing cultivation speed was naturally much faster than the people of Xian continent. Most importantly, this thing could be used for dual cultivation at any time, anywhere. It was undoubtedly a huge advantage. The strange races that swarmed over like the rising tide of the sea were only from the few tribes near the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. The sudden collapse of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains and the eruption of the volcano caused great harm to the people of Xian continent, but to the strange races, the damage was not small either. The eruption of the volcano killed and injured many strange races, but there were still many who escaped, especially the stronger ones. This level of natural disaster was not enough to threaten the truly strong ones. And for those tribes that were slightly further away from the Pillar of Heaven's mountains, other than being slightly shocked, there were no casualties. And besides the shock, there was also a deep sense of joy, following the sudden collapse of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. The air that had been blocked since ancient times surged into the south of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains like a spring breeze. This gave these strange races an indescribable sense of comfort. This feeling stimulated the strange races even more. Invading the Pillar of Heaven's mountains and occupying the Xian continent had always been the biggest dream of the strange races. The other side of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains was rich with water and grass, the land was fertile, and the scenery was beautiful. What a beautiful place it was! In the Xian continent, the most inhospitable place for humans, to the strange races, it was a heavenly existence. So, seeing the collapse of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains, these strange races did not hesitate and spontaneously formed a team of experts, charging through the gap without fear of death. The volcano continued to erupt, and there were many obstacles, but it could not stop the strange races from advancing towards the beautiful future. and in the entire pillar of heaven's mountains that stretched for tens of thousands of miles, there were still many gaps like this that were not blocked by the volcano. Everywhere, there was a group of fellows with 2 bodies and 2 heads surging out, more and more and more and more frenzied. If someone were to look down from the sky, they would discover that the situation was like Pandora's box had suddenly been opened. Suddenly, the sky was filled with demons and ghosts. This was not the most terrifying thing, because the most terrifying thing was that the demons and ghosts were still continuing to appear, endlessly. And among these few tribes, the strongest leader was the hell-enduring ghost of the strange races, Shangchuan Peku. With Shangchuan Peku's strength, even in the entire territory of the strange races, he could be said to be a demon king. He had many experts under him, tens of thousands of level 9 ninjas, and 70 to 80 hell-enduring ninjas and middle ninjas. Shangchuan Peku and his assistant, Xiachuan Peshao, were both battle maniacs. Seeing the unexpected collapse of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains, the 2 of them made the same decision in an extremely short period of time. This is a heaven-sent opportunity. It's the best time for our race to break through the Pillar of Heaven's mountains and occupy the Xian continent. So, they ignored the volcano's poison and the high temperature, and gathered all the subordinates they could and charged into the Xian continent at the first instant. In their minds, even they would not be able to endure such a terrible climate, not to mention those pampered Xian people at the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. This way, it would definitely be a smooth and unobstructed path. As long as they could charge into the humans' territory, everything would be fine. But they did not expect that the moment they charged through the Pillar of Heaven's mountains, a huge wave of enemies appeared in front of them. It was Tian Fa's Xian beasts. Their numbers were not small, and any one of them was a powerful expert. If not for the huge disparity in numbers, it would have been a one-sided massacre. With a single command, Shangchuan Peku's eyes turned bloodshot as he began to attack with all his might. As long as they entered this place, even if they had to die on this land. They definitely could not retreat to the south of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains, where life and death was at stake. A nightmarish and terrifying homeland. The Eagle King let out a long cry, and the Bear King roared furiously, giving the order to attack at the same time. The 6,000 disciples landed at the same time, and all the Eagle People warriors turned into human forms and retreated at the same time. And at this moment, the bear warriors who had come down from their bodies strode forward. The brave warriors of the bear tribe used their sturdy bodies to lay down an impregnable line of defense for their comrades who fought alongside them, to give the Eagle People some time to rest and recuperate. After all, they had flown tens of thousands of li in a single breath. Almost all the warriors of the Eagle People were already exhausted. Chapter 1132. Bear Mountain landed on the ground, standing in front of the entire troop. His majestic body was like the sturdiest iron tower, and every step he took made a loud bang. He looked coldly at the strange-looking aliens who were screaming and charging at him, and suddenly burst into laughter. "Tyrant! What are you laughing at?" Shangchuan Peku roared in anger, pointing at him. At the same time, his twin sister also screamed, "Idiot! What are you laughing at?" "Ha ha ha!" Bear Mountain clutched his stomach, slapped his thighs, and laughed loudly. "I've long heard of the strange race's so-called abnormalities, and this king thought that Senior was just bragging and exaggerating. But now that I've seen it, I know that there really are such disgusting things like you in this world. This world is really big, and there are all sorts of strange things. This king admires. What Senior said is not false. What you said is not false. Today has truly broadened my horizons." Shangchuan Peku's two heads roared angrily at the same time. "Impudent! Bastard!" One voice was rough, the other shrill. It was not pleasant to listen to, and now that the two voices were mixed together, it was really unspeakably uncomfortable. Bear Mountain rolled his eyes and spat out a mouthful of saliva, saying disdainfully, "You things look like this, and you actually have the guts to come out and wander around, truly shameless. We, the Tian Fa forest, have always thought that us Xian beasts are already considered ugly compared to humans. Who knew that standing in front of you, this king suddenly discovered how handsome and elegant I am. This is the first time this king has felt such a sense of superiority, thank you. You bunch of monsters, hurry up and find a crooked tree to hang yourself, what are you waiting for? And, this king has misspoken, how can one tree be enough, at least two to be distributed?" This Bear Mountain's skill with words was really sharp. Just a second ago he was still thanking them, and the next second he was actually encouraging them to commit suicide. Shangchuan Paku was enraged, and with a long howl, he shouted, "He's stalling for time, waiting for those feathered beasts to recover. Everyone, charge forward and chop them into minced meat." This person was quite meticulous. With just a few words, he saw through Bear Mountain's intentions and even ordered his subordinates to attack. Bear Mountain spat angrily, "Pay! Do you think a bunch of half-man, half-woman, half-human, half-ghost monsters like you are worth this king stalling for time? This King Bear Mountain is Tian Fa's Bear King. Monster, tell me your name. This king's saber does not slay nameless ghosts. This seat is Shangchuan Paku." Shangchuan Paku laughed sinisterly. "Tian Fa Bear King? Not bad, not bad. This is the first battle this seat entered the continent, and to have the Bear King sacrifice for me, this trip can be considered not in vain. I've heard that the beast cores of the Tian Fa beasts are the most nourishing. Presumably, the beast cores of the Beast Kings are even better. I've just entered the Xian continent, and I've already obtained such an opportunity. How lucky! Ha ha! Big brother, why are you wasting your breath on this non-human? He could just go forward and slash him. As the saying goes, there's no need to use a butcher's knife to kill a chicken. This little brother requests to deal with this Bear King, and obtain the Beast King core to present to Big Brother." As his assistant, Xiachuan Pagua strode forward and looked coldly at Bear Mountain. Lengling said, "Bear Mountain, with your status, you are not worthy of my big brother personally taking action. This seat is Xiachuan Pagua, and I'm here to send you on your way." Bear Mountain blinked a few times, stunned for a moment. Then, he suddenly burst into laughter, laughing so hard that he could not catch his breath. Panting, he said, "En? Wearing rags on the top? Wearing rags on the bottom? You guys really know how to give names. If not for this king's quick thinking, I would have been tricked by you guys. This name is really F***King. TSK, amazing. This king is very curious, this upside down. How are you guys going to wear it? This is really a rare thing today." Eagle King, who was in the midst of regulating his breathing, could not help but roll his eyes. He almost wanted to jump up and kick this fourth brother bear away. "You actually dare to boast about your quick thinking? 2 names and you were stunned for a moment. If it was me, I would have laughed long ago. Tyrant!" Xiachuan Pagua's 2 heads roared at the same time. Leaping up, a long saber appeared in mid-air and he slashed down. Bear Mountain laughed loudly and strode forward. His right hand moved, and with a clang, his sword was unsheathed. It was the divine weapon that June Moxie had given him that year. He slashed forward without any tricks. Xiachuan Pagua faced Bear Mountain's head and revealed a sinister smile. The long saber in his hand was made from the special metal of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. Compared to ordinary sabers and swords, it was many times stronger. Now that he saw Bear Mountain brazenly coming forward with his sword, he could not help but be overjoyed. He was almost certain that this saber of his would definitely be able to split the other party into 2. He had heard that the inner cores of Tian Fa's beasts were extremely powerful. If he really obtained it, he would swallow it on the spot. That Shangchuan Paku was only slightly stronger than him, but he always ordered him around. As long as his strength increased greatly, he would be able to turn the tables. With that thought, he put in even more effort. Since you're seeking death, you can't blame me. I'll lend you a beast core and establish my glorious hegemony. Xiachuan Pagua's imagination was undoubtedly beautiful. But the reality was too different, too different. A loud, dang sound was heard, and sparks flew in all directions. Big Bear was like an abyss and a lofty mountain, towering and unmoving. Xiachuan Pagua did a somersault and was forced back to his original position. Both of them lowered their heads at the same time and looked at their weapons. Bear Mountain's eyes widened. The Bear King's sword in his hand was as cool as water. The blade did not seem to be damaged at all. He could not help but feel relieved. Then, he was overjoyed. This sword that brother-in-law gave was truly a divine weapon. Ah! Xiachuan Pagua let out a heart-wrenching roar. The fact that he hadn't managed to break Bear King's sword in one strike was already out of his expectations. Now that he was inspecting his own saber, he was shocked to discover that on the blade of the saber that he treasured as much as his own life, there was actually a rice grain-sized chip on it. The saber that he used was most suited for slashing, and it was already a divine weapon. Under his carelessness, and even clashing head-on with the other party's sword that was not suited for slashing, the one that was damaged was his own saber. This kind of reality, this kind of result, was something that Xiachuan Pagua could not accept. He really did not dare to believe, and could not believe, that in this Xian continent there was actually someone whose weapon was better than his. This was the enduring ghost blade. Xiachuan Pagua's mouth slowly dripped with blood. Although he could be considered a top-notch expert among the strange races, and had already reached the level of the Holy Emperor, but compared to Bear Mountain's Holy Emperor's level of brute strength, the difference was not just a single level. In such an intense battle, although it was only one strike, his internal organs had already been injured. Fresh blood dripped onto the ground, and with a chi sound, the high temperature of the ground turned it into a green smoke with a fishy smell. Kakik. Bear Mountain's ear-piercing laughter rang out. Two-headed tortoise, you still have some strength. Come, fight with this lord again. Just that one strike, how can it be counted? Look at how cocky you guys were just now, and you even wanted to take this lord's inner core. F***ck, if I don't show you guys some power, you guys really think that you're something because you've grown two heads? Xiachuan Pagua raised his head and looked at Bear Mountain. With a sudden roar, he pounced forward again. Bear Mountain laughed maniacally and took a big step forward. But then, he stopped in his tracks. Because, just as Xiachuan Pagua's figure was about to collide with their weapons, there was a sudden bang, and a thick cloud of smoke exploded in midair, blocking everyone's vision. Then, Xiachuan Pagua mysteriously disappeared in the thick smoke. Old Bear, be careful, this is the legendary Strange Race's invisibility technique. Eagle King shouted. Be careful? Haha, is there any use in being careful? Just wait for your death, you stupid damned black bear. Shangchuan Paku laughed proudly. Bear Mountain snorted. At this moment, he recalled Jun Moxie's words. When fighting strange races, you must first maintain a calm heart. They have invisibility techniques, and there are too few of us who can see through them. So, once you discover that the strange races are invisible, you must not believe your own eyes. When the strange races are invisible, you must close your own eyes, and let your heart maintain a clear and ethereal state. Use your mind's eye to feel everything around you. Use your ears to catch the slightest sound, and concentrate all your spirit to fight. Use your mind's eye to feel, use your ears to catch, use your spirit to fight. Bear Mountain muttered to himself. In that instant, he seemed to have understood something, and then he closed his huge eyes. The sword in his hand slowly lowered, and his entire body relaxed. In his ears, the rumbling sounds continued to ring out, and the ground beneath his feet continued to tremble. But Bear Mountain did not seem to be able to feel any of this. All his senses were used to catch the impending fatal danger. On the left, danger suddenly appeared. A faint, almost imperceptible sound of the wind suddenly rang out. Bear Mountain still stood motionless. At this moment of life and death, he fully displayed his powerful battle prowess as a king of a generation. There was finesse within the course. There was finesse within the course. Suddenly, in the empty space on the left, a bright and cold blade light seemed to suddenly appear from nothingness. An exceptionally ruthless blade slashed towards Bear Mountain's neck. The moment the blade light appeared, it was already less than a foot away from Bear Mountain's neck. Bear Mountain snorted coldly. Holding his sword with one hand, he instantly flipped it upwards. With a dang sound, the life-reaping long blade was flicked out. Following that, he stabbed out with his sword, towards the back of the blade light. A surprised sound came from the void. Following that, the blade light completely disappeared, and Bear Mountain's counterattack also missed. The sound of the wind in the surroundings suddenly rang out violently. Xiachuan Pagua was moving around at high speed, using Xian energy, blade energy, palm wind, and all kinds of energy that could be used. Even the rocks that were bouncing on the ground, to create an extremely chaotic environment, intending to disrupt Bear Mountain's pure senses. Moreover, that awe-inspiring saber light seemed to strike from every direction and every part of Big Bear's body at all times, attacking him from every angle. Chapter 1133. This was the secret race's greatest winning technique in the war for seizing the heavens. Relying on this concealment technique, they were able to deal with enemies who were a few levels higher than them, using the weak to defeat the strong. In the Xian continent, this technique was known as the Strange Race's concealment technique. But in the hands of the Strange Races, it was known as the Stealth Kill technique. Enduring Ghost Stealth Kill technique, Enduring Earth Stealth Kill technique, Enduring Heaven Stealth Kill technique. Watching the battle, Eagle King's eyes were filled with worry, and his face was extremely heavy. Bear King's personal strength and Xian cultivation were indeed much higher than that Xiachuan Pagua. In terms of cultivation, the two of them were not on the same level. If they really fought head-on, Eagle King believed that Bear King would be able to turn this disgusting conjoined body into minced meat in a few breaths' time. But the moment the opponent used this strange concealment technique, no matter how strong Bear King was, he would be rendered useless. He would not be able to find the opponent, and he would become the opponent's target. How could he fight such a battle? Offense was the best defense, and the Strange Races who were in a state of offense did not need to worry about their own weaknesses. Although Bear King had followed Jun Moxie's instructions and temporarily defended against the opponent's attacks, he would definitely lose if he defended for too long. Blindly defending had already put him in a position where he could not win. At this moment, Eagle King suddenly understood why the Xian side's casualties were so high in the past war for seizing the heavens. Because the only chance to kill the enemy was when the enemy's attack was successful, and the enemy's weapon was embedded in his body. And only at that moment would he be able to grasp the opponent's position and kill him in one strike. But at that time, he would already be on the brink of death, and before he could kill the enemy, he would already be dead. In that case, the best outcome would be mutual destruction. The other option was to directly self-destruct when the opponent was attacking. If he could not see through the concealment technique, then there were only these two methods to defeat the enemy. The method was different, but the result was the same. Regardless of whether he could defeat the enemy or not, he had to pay with his life. Many of the senior profound practitioners of the Xian continent had actually lived like this for more than 10,000 years. He had trained his entire life just to die a glorious death in this moment. How sorrowful was this! How miserable it was! But there was no other way. No wonder the Heaven Saint Palace valued Qiao Ying, who possessed the all-seeing eye, so much. Because only Qiao Ying could see through the strange race's concealment. Only Qiao Ying alone was the key to victory. Now, at this very moment, it was his and Bear King's turn to face this predicament. Behind them were the billions of people of the Xian continent. At this moment, only the two of them were leading 6,000 brothers. How should they fight this battle? With Lao Xiong's fiery temper, would he finally be unable to bear it and perish together with the other party while defending blindly? The Eagle King was secretly worried. He quickened his breathing. The situation on the battlefield had obviously reached a white-hot level. The surrounding air was filled with dazzling blade lights, as though they had gathered to form a huge net, enveloping Bear Mountain within. Bear Mountain closed his eyes as he stood in the middle of the huge net formed by the blade lights. He could only passively counter every move. The usually rash him was unusually calm today, without the slightest bit of impatience. He maintained the pure state of his heart's eye at all times. No matter how the opponent attacked, he would stand tall like a mountain, unmoving like a mountain, calm like a mountain. Once the weapons of both sides clashed, he would immediately counterattack. Unfortunately, after a few counterattacks, he was depressed to discover that the strange race's concealment technique actually separated the body from the long blade. A person was a person, a blade was a blade, there was almost no relation between them. When the long blade was obviously coming from one side, their body would be on the other side, and definitely not parallel to the long blade. Furthermore, the position was constantly changing, without any pattern to speak of. In order to find the opponent's true body under such an attack, it was almost completely relying on luck. This kind of fighting method undoubtedly made Bear Mountain extremely depressed. It was one thing to defend and be able to defend, but it was another thing to be depressed. When he could no longer endure it, what would happen? Blood splattered. Just as Eagle King had predicted, defending for a long time would lead to failure. The strange race's Xiachuan Pagua's long blade finally broke through Bear King's defense, slicing through Bear Mountain's left shoulder. And at this moment, Bear Mountain roared, using his muscles to wrap around the blade, his long sword consecutively piercing towards three positions where there was clearly nothing around the long blade. However, there was an inexplicable groan in the air, and a blood arrow suddenly shot out. When Big Bear followed the trail and attacked in the direction the blood arrow came from, there was no one there anymore. However, the saber light that had filled the sky earlier had also disappeared. After being suppressed for a long time, Bear King finally could not endure it any longer, and followed in the footsteps of his predecessors. Using a method of mutual destruction to injure the enemy, in exchange for an opportunity. If not for the fact that there were still 3,000 Eagle People brothers behind him that needed him to protect them until they finished recuperating, Bear King would not have used the method of mutual destruction, but directly chose to kill both sides. The supreme Bear King of this generation, when had he ever been so aggrieved? As these two streams of blood gushed out one after another, the atmosphere and the surroundings suddenly became horrifying. Vaguely, it was about to explode. South of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains, behind the strange races, heads continued to swarm out. Countless strange races discovered this gap, and like flies that had found honey, they swarmed in endlessly. Obviously, the situation was getting worse. There was still about another incense's time before the Eagle People could recover their battle strength, and now, the number of people swarming up had already exceeded 20,000. Bear Mountain panted heavily, his eyes gradually turning red. The long blade flashed in the air again, and Xiachuan Pagua's long blade struck out like lightning. Bear Mountain roared, his body suddenly spinning, and the long sword in his hand spun out a mountain of swords, shooting out in all directions. It was an omnidirectional attack. This was undoubtedly a method to break through stealth, but once this method was used, besides expending a lot of energy, it also exposed his countless flaws in front of others. But there was a cry of alarm. Bear King could clearly feel that the bone-piercing sense of danger just now had disappeared. At the side, Shangchuan Peku finally could not take it anymore and roared angrily. Xiachuan, what the hell are you doing? The opponent is just a stupid bear, and you actually let him delay for so long. Xiachuan Pegua, who was in stealth, almost cursed out loud. Just a stupid bear? F***ck. This guy was a real Bear King, and a peak level 4 expert of the Holy Emperor. My strength is at most level 3 of the Holy Emperor. To be able to tangle with the opponent for so long and even force him into a disadvantage, this result is already very good. If I really take the risk to kill this Bear King, then I will definitely have to pay with my life. This is something that I can be absolutely sure of, and there is no room for doubt. If you are not convinced, then come at me. Call your mother then. I know you are anxious, but do you think I am not? After Shangchuan Peku roared, he turned his head to look at the endless stream of people from his own tribe. The one leading them was the Deku family that had always been at odds with him, and was usually the fiercest competitor. Looks like this bunch of fellows also wanted this credit. Shangchuan Peku suddenly gritted his teeth and roared. This is the first battle to occupy the Xian continent, and it is the greatest honor of my tribe. This honor, I, Shangchuan, will definitely take it. I will not allow anyone to snatch it. All of a sudden, he roared, all warriors of the Shangchuan tribe, charge together. Tear this bunch of black bears into pieces. Open the path for my tribe to invade the continent. Following the command, thousands of two-headed monsters let out a strange cry and rushed forward in a black mass. Behind them, a group of strange races with only a few pieces of cloth wrapped around their bodies looked forward, their gazes landing on a burly two-headed man. Lord Deku, what should we do? This person was the #1 competitor of the strange races, the Shangchuan family. The head of the Deku family, Deku Bushang. His head that belonged to a man Lenglang looked forward and laughed coldly. Order all warriors to stop, do not move recklessly. Are we not going to join forces with the Shangchuan family and break through the defensive line of the Xian continent? A two-headed man asked. Break through the defensive line? How can it be so easy? Deku Bushang snorted coldly and said, the other side is a troop formed by the Bear King of the Tian Fa Forest. They can be said to be the bravest race in the Tian Fa Forest, and are especially good at defense. If all of our troops have broken through to the Enduring Ghosts realm, and everyone can use the Enduring Ghosts stealth kill technique, it will naturally be possible to deal with this troop. But currently, the number of people in our family who can use the Enduring Ghosts stealth kill technique is less than 100. The remaining people will not even have the slightest ability to retaliate if they fight with this bear troop, and will only meet the fate of being slaughtered. Going up to die? He looked ahead gloatingly and said, let those idiots of the Shangchuan family taste some pain first, and also use this to wear down the spirit of those black bears. After that, it will not be too late for us to make our move. Just like what the people of the Xian continent say, the fisherman reaps the benefits. Lord is wise, Lord is wise. Many people chimed in. Deku Bushang said proudly, if this seat's estimate is not wrong, I believe that the number of Shangchuan family troops that can return alive from this clash will not exceed 200. Not exceed 200. The two-headed man beside him sucked in a breath of cold air. Could it be that the battle strength of Tian Fa's bear army is really so terrifying? These are all level 9 ninjas, and there are at least more than 8,000 of them. The bear army that can fight on the other side will, at most, have 2,000 to 3,000 people. With such an advantage, could it be that they will not be able to win? Not only will they not be able to win, they will be defeated extremely miserably. I even believe that the other side's battle strength will not be reduced too much. A cruel glint shone in Dekubu Shang's eyes as he said, "If you don't believe me, just wait and see." Everyone turned their gazes to the battlefield. Everyone held their breath. Right at this time, Bear King let out a long roar and shouted, "Brothers, Tian Fa's majesty is not to be blasphemed, Tian Fa's dignity is not to be offended. Everyone, kill them for me. Chop these bastards into pieces. Kill every last one of them. Oh! Chop these bastards into pieces. Kill every last one of them." 3,000 bear warriors roared at the same time, and with a swoosh 3,000 blades appeared in their hands at the same time, forming a solid blade light in the air. Chapter 1134. 3,000 majestic figures strode forward to meet them head-on. As for Saint Venerable Lu and the other 7 brothers, they were holding the line from afar. Before the experts of the other side made their move, they absolutely could not make a move. The 8 of them were the most important strength to protect the 3,000 warriors of the Eagle People. Before the 3,000 warriors of the Eagle People recovered, they could not afford to be careless in the slightest. As for the situation before them, Saint Venerable Lu and the rest were completely certain that they were not needed in this battle. Bear Mountain and his tribe were completely capable of dealing with it. What they needed to do was to wait quietly, wait for the moment when the experts of the other side could no longer endure it. The 3,000 warriors of the Bear tribe surged forward, their majestic footsteps forming an unstoppable stream of iron. 3,000 pairs of eyes were filled with an unconcealable frenzied battle intent, filled with killing intent that soared to the heavens. Although the strange races had conjoined bodies, and each of them was equivalent to 2 normal humans, when they stood together with the warriors of the Bear tribe, their bodies were not as sturdy as the warriors of the Bear tribe. The 2 groups of people were like 2 raging torrents colliding with each other, carrying with them an aura of no return. With a loud roar, they charged towards each other. At this moment, the tremors of the earth became even more intense. There was only a distance of 300 zhang between the 2 sides. Both sides had only taken a few steps forward like a hurricane, and they had already collided. This collision caused a rain of blood to fill the sky. The ground was covered with severed limbs and shattered bodies. In the eyes of outsiders, the 2 groups of people were advancing without a care for anything else. Those who fell midway immediately turned into a pile of meat paste. Miserable cries, loud roars, and the sounds of weapons clashing shook the earth, shook the heavens, and even shocked all the people of the Deku family who were watching the battle from behind. So, the battle strength of the Beast Kings of Tian Fa was actually this terrifying. This battle started quickly, but it ended even faster. Once the 2 groups of people were squeezed together, it was tantamount to starting the bloodiest and cruelest battle to the death. Just as Deku Bushang had judged, the battle prowess of the Bear tribe warriors far surpassed that of the Shangchuan warriors. This was especially so for the burly men of the Bear tribe. All of them wielded the long sabers that Jun Moxie had carefully prepared for them, the sabers that had already reached the level of divine weapons. The sharpness of the long sabers was secondary. Every saber was extremely heavy, long and broad, at least 2 meters long. Once it was swung, it would be filled with thunderbolts and lightning. This kind of saber, even if it did not have a sharp edge, with the weight of the saber and the immense strength of the bear warriors, it was enough to smash a person into minced meat. The vitality of the mutated races was undoubtedly tenacious, far surpassing that of ordinary humans. Even if a sword pierced through a vital point such as the heart, the other half of their body would not be able to stop them from continuing to fight. But even such a tough and special body couldn't withstand the full force of such a long and incomparably sharp saber. With one slash, the person who was struck by the slash was immediately cut into 4 pieces. No matter how strong one's vitality was, in front of such a murderous weapon, it was just a joke. It was just a joke. After all, not all the mutated races were hell-enduring ghosts. Although the number of people participating in the battle was great, there were only 70 to 80 of them who could truly conceal themselves. In such a large-scale chaotic battle, although these people had played a considerable role, heavily injuring many bear warriors, it was also because of this chaos that many hell-enduring ghosts had fallen to a flurry of blades. A total of 3,000 2-meter-long sabers were swung at the same time. Even if you could conceal yourself, your body could not really turn into air, right? If they were lucky and were slashed into a sky full of blood, then in the next instant, the entire sky would be filled with the saber light of the bear warriors. Once both sides clashed, at least 20 to 30 hell-enduring ghosts would die under the chaotic slashes, just like that. Any random hell-enduring ghost would have a considerable amount of strength. If they relied on the concealment technique, in a one-on-one battle, or in a small-scale battle, it would definitely have a profound effect that could decide the outcome of the battle. But compared to a large-scale battle where tens of thousands of people were tangled together, where everyone was fighting with their lives on the line, the drawbacks of this concealment technique finally appeared. Because no matter how good they were at concealment, they could not completely evade the attacks of experts of the same level from all directions. Therefore, this kind of casualty was completely expected and within expectations. In the end, Shangchuan Peku also realized that something was wrong. He immediately ordered all the hell-enduring ghosts to retreat, but his heart ached so much that he almost fainted. The 76 hell-enduring ghosts that were sent out had originally planned to mingle in the crowd and take advantage of the situation. But who would have thought that they would pay such a heavy price? In the end, less than 50 people actually returned, and more than 30% of them were injured. To the Shangchuan clan, this was an extremely heavy blow. But after the hell-enduring ghosts retreated from the chaotic battle, the battle turned into a one-sided massacre. What the bear warriors were most worried about and wary of were those who could conceal themselves. They were not afraid of them attacking them, but they were afraid that they would directly hide themselves and go around them to attack the Eagle People brothers who were resting. So, in the midst of battle, everyone was under a lot of mental pressure. At the same time, they were very cautious. But the moment the hell-enduring ghosts of the Shangchuan clan retreated, all the bear warriors were like wild bulls that had let go of their fences. 2 zhang long snow-white sabers, each one of them weighing several hundred jin. As they chopped down, it was as if they were harvesting rice, each saber slicing through a patch. Towards the end, Bear Mountain was so excited from the slaughter that he ordered the bear warriors to form groups of 10 and swing their sabers at the same time. The 10 sabers swung out in unison, and within a radius of 30 zhang, heads rolled everywhere, as if a tractor pulling a watermelon had been overturned. Fresh blood gushed out like a fountain, spraying a gorgeous rainbow in the sky from time to time before falling to the ground, turning into wisps of green smoke on the scorching, dark red ground. Kill! Leave no one alive! Bear Mountain's face was twisted as he roared. Kill! The bear warriors roared at the same time. The battle intent that had been accumulated for countless years, the ferocity of the Xian beasts that had been suppressed in their bones, was completely unleashed in this bloody battle. What a terrifying bear warrior! What a terrifying Tian Fa warrior! Shangchuan Peku's face was ashen as he looked at the battlefield. His body couldn't help but tremble. His clansmen were still charging forward wave after wave, but Shangchuan Peku knew that this battle was already over. No matter what the final result was, it was over for him. He had lost completely. No matter how ferocious he was, no matter how bloodthirsty he was, the huge difference in strength was already placed in front of him. Apart from the dozens of hell-enduring ghosts that had already retreated, the strongest among the rest was only a 9th-level ninja. At most, they were at the level of a human supremacy. This kind of person was fighting against 3,000 genuine holy emperor saints, and all the weapons in their hands were divine weapons. This kind of difference was undoubtedly the difference between heaven and earth. It would only be a one-sided massacre. The more that went up, the more that would die. That group of black bear killer embryos would never have the slightest bit of mercy. As the battle raged, the blood on the ground became thicker and thicker. At the start, the ground could still quickly evaporate due to the high temperature, leaving behind only brown marks. But now it was already a pool of blood. In such a high-temperature environment, it was already too late to evaporate. Almost all the bear warriors were bathed in blood, but the injuries that truly belonged to them were negligible. The damage that a bunch of weak ants could do to them was simply too little. Other than a few hell-enduring ghosts that were heavily injured at the start of the battle, the others were basically unharmed. With the retreat of the hell-enduring ghosts, the disparity in strength between the two sides became even greater. They didn't even suffer any injuries. A total of 3,000 bear tribe warriors, facing the strange races that outnumbered them by several times, actually had 0 casualties. Actually, this result was within reason. After all, no matter how many ants there were, it was meaningless to elephants that were as lively as dragons and tigers. Especially when it wasn't just one elephant, but a rather large group of elephants. Not a single one of the 3,000 bear tribe burly men was willing to retreat. Even those who had been injured by the hell-enduring ghosts were no exception. All of them brandished the sabers in their hands with all their might, forming a huge mountain of sabers as they carried out a one-sided massacre. They slashed crazily without stopping for a single moment, leaving behind a ground of meat paste behind them. There wasn't a single complete corpse, because all of these fellows were waving their sabers at the same time. Usually, a strange race would be slashed by about 10 people with 10 sabers. The result was naturally not just 4 slices. 40 slices was also a lotta in the instant they were struck. Not only were they cut into 2, they were directly sliced into dried sweet potatoes. Close to 10,000 strange races of the Shangchuan tribe were turned into a ground of blood in less than half an incense's time in front of the 3,000 bear warriors of Tian Fa. A ground of meat paste, and the 3,000 bear warriors stood proudly in front of the strange races under the lead of Bear Mountain, stepping on the blood and meat paste on the ground. 3,000 pairs of large eyes shone with a cold, killing intent. That was a killing intent that hadn't had its fill yet. Their bloodthirsty eyes stared at the increasing number of mutated humans gathering behind the Shangchuan family. All the bear warriors' eyes were filled with eagerness, yearning for another round of slaughter. Another round of slaughter to their heart's content. It was obvious that this battle was not intense enough for them. It was not on a high enough level. Killing was not satisfying enough. There were a total of 3,000 shiny sabers. The tips of the sabers were pointed downwards, and thick blood was still dripping from them. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.